2019 Legislative Committee for their commitment in putting this event for us all together. Let's give them a big round of applause and recognition. If they can all stand, I'm going to name them out one by one, please. If we can have our Legislative Committee stand, or you want to wait for me to call you out. Okay? So part of our Legislative Committee, guys, they put this wonderful event together. We're going to have a fantastic show today. We have our chairman of the committee, Mr. John Duenas, right here. Our co-chair, Ray Haddock. Carl Peterson. Ronald de Guzman. Joanne Ige. Sitting down over there. Marcel Camacho. Earl Garrido. Chris Salas. And Lou Perez. I also want to acknowledge that our 35th Guam legislator for their support in attending this event. Some of them are not here right now. Well, a lot of them are not here right now. But nonetheless, we are here to gather some support, and our intention here this afternoon is to create a harmonious working relationship with our leaders of the island. For them to welcome that what we have to share and allow us to a seat at the table for when they have their bills, when they have new legislative topics that come around. We want to work with them, and not only for the betterment of our real estate industry, but rather for good stewards of our island. Today is an opportunity for our time to listen and to learn from each other. Let's all keep an open mind. So without further delay, here's our 2019 Chairman of the Legislative Committee, John Duenas.
Thank you. Happy day. I'm John Duenas. I'm principal broker of Remax Diamond Realty, and also chairman of the Legislative Committee. Thank you all. We have a full house. You guys should be congratulated for showing up. We are going to have some presentations of critical issues that affect our real estate industry. Our presenters are lined up, ready to provide the presentations. There are going to be some guidelines today, a protocol for how the presentations and the dialogue afterwards will proceed. Each presenter will have about 20 minutes. We can accommodate your questions after each presentation. Few questions so that we won't delay the presentations. We'll proceed to the next presenter. There'll be Q&A opportunities afterwards. We'll have a dialogue with our senators, whoever are present here. I hope more show up. We have seats for them up here. And we hope we have a full dialogue. By the way, you get 3 CEU credits for your presence here. You have to attend the whole meeting, so don't leave early. And that's a great thing. Just to remind you, we're going to have 6 CEU credits for 2 consecutive general membership meetings. So that's how much you don't have to take online, any courses take online to make up your CEU requirements. Please, if you have an opportunity, or if you think you want to ask questions, write down your questions so that you can ask them succinctly. And if you are a little shy about asking questions, you can give us your written questions, Bobby or myself, and we will ask the questions. So thank you very much. Have a great afternoon and participate. Thank you.
Before we get started here, I'm going to ask one more time for everybody in this audience, every member of our organization. We're 470 strong on this island right now. We all need to give a good pat on our back and just congratulate ourselves for being here today and being great stewards of our community. Okay? We have part of our Realtor Party Action Committee here. We have Liz Duenas. Liz, please stand up. Ryan de Guzman. Claire, is Claire here? There is Claire Delgado. So folks, today, we're gonna be around in the room, and if you wanna come by and continue to invest and take a step up and become a major investor, or continue with your $30, please reach out to one of us three, or I'm included on that list. So please, we'll also be there in the corner, right when you enter in, so that we can register you online and get you started. Without further delay, I'm going to ask the senators if they would like to come up here and have a seat. Hopefully, you guys had your quick lunch. Not yet? Okay. We can have it. You should finish your lunch first. Okay. So that maybe we could take a little break during one of the sessions and then bring them up. Yeah? Okay. So without further delay here, we have presenting on skilled labor on Guam, Mr. Monty McDowell.
My God, a moving part I can't handle. Hey, buenas tardes, everyone. It's good to be. It's hard to. Oh, John, is it loud enough for you, buddy? My chairman, man, you look so awesome up there speaking. God, if I could only do half as good. Woo.
Switch it.
Anyway, what?
Your mic is cutting in and out.
I want to go.
1, 2.
Good. Take it home. How's that? Hey. Well, I was saying, John Wayne, how awesome. And then Bobby up there, man, we're just fortunate to have him this year. Running that show, and then legislative committee out here under the tutelage of John Duenas. We were on the TV the other day, the KUAM Extra, and he imparted on Jason Solis that it was really nice to see the place his wife works. He'd always wanted to go visit the office, that couch, whatever. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about skilled labor. I would like to start off from a construction manager of Guam, somebody who's been doing it for many years, from his perspective, so you can hear what he thinks. No preconceived notion nobody told him what to say or whatever. He's working jobs every day of the week. He came to Guam many years ago to manage the development of the Guam Premier Outlets. He came from Hilo, Hawaii. We keep trying to take him to the airport and send him back. He won't leave. He just loves Guam. And so he's been running construction ever since. So Bill Berry is the man, and him and I are founding fathers of the Trades Academy. So near and dear to build skilled labor on the island. Meanwhile, while we're building it, we need to have it so that he'll discuss particularly the guest labor issue from his perspective. Mr. Berry, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm a member of the GCA, and I'm also the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Trades Academy with Monty. And so we're heavily involved with what I call construction in Guam. I know the newspapers and all the media talk a lot about the H2 situation, and I kind of want to bring a kind of a reality check to that. And Greg Massey will talk numbers and has a better feel for the numbers than I do, but we have about 6,000 workers in Guam right now, of which about 1,000 in round numbers are H2s. A year ago we had 5,000 and very, very few H2s. So for the last 4 to 5 years, most of the construction work you see in Guam has been handled by locals and those 5,000 workers. 10 years ago, we had maybe 2,000 locals in the construction industry. Today, we've got 5,000. Now, it has increased because the volume of work and there's more opportunities, of course. Our industry is I've been here 22 years now, and has really cycled up and down. And so it hasn't in the past been a real good employment opportunity, because you'd have a job this year, but next year you'd be laid off. So, but now we seem to have a growth industry. Now our local workforce probably isn't as skilled as we like it to be. But I always feel bad when I read the paper and we start talking about the super shortage of skilled workers. If you look at some of the construction work that has been done in the last 3 to 5 years, that's been done with locals. And so we've got a pretty good workforce here, but we have limited numbers. I'm a numbers guy, and we get into how many workers do we really need to keep up. The Navy is giving out about 600 million, 700 million this year of volume, plus the private sector. We estimate about 100 to 150,000 volume per worker per year. So if we've got 6,000 workers, in theory, we should be able to handle 700 to 900 million per year in volume. Now all that means is, and I don't want to kid you, we're short-handed. We need more people. And Guam is limited. We're not going to get a lot more people here into the industry. We're trying to get them from the high schools as they come out of school, get them interested in a construction trade, but we're still going to be limited. And so we probably need another 2,000 to 3,000+ workers here to keep up with what the Navy's going to give us, plus the outside the fence. So what do we really do here locally? Well, if we don't have enough workers, what typically happens? The project takes longer to build. In other words, you adjust your schedule and live with what you got, kind of a thing. The hard one is productivity, and that's where the Trades Academy comes in. We formed the Trades Academy in 2007, I believe, and we've touched about 3,000 people in terms of craft skill training and apprenticeship programs and so forth. And it's been very rewarding. It seems like if people know why they're doing what they're doing, they seem to be happier doing it. Doesn't sound very profound, but it's very true. But when I always tell Monty this story. When I first came to Guam, we were doing the conversion of Gibsons to GPO, and concrete truck drives up, and there's 10 guys waiting for the concrete. One truck, 10 guys. And I said, what are we doing here? What's happening? And they said, well, that's Guam. You put a lot of men because the cost of labor is down, and we make sure we have enough people to do the work. What they're really saying is productivity is not very good. So if we train people and we get them interested and we teach them the skills, it seems like the productivity gets better. So we've always used kind of a 3-to-1 ratio, where if we compared our costs here in Guam for labor and productivity, typically we needed 3 guys here in Guam to equate to 1 guy in Hawaii, a journeyman carpenter, a journeyman mason. So what we tried to do was lower that ratio. In other words, if we can go from 3-to-1 to 2-to-1, and basically our productivity improves, more better for everybody. The Trades Academy has been a success so far. We continue to try and get more and more people into it. The industry sends their people. We're involved with the high schools and different programs. And so all in all, I think we're doing the best we can, but we always need to do more. but in closing, I don't want to downplay the need for the H2s. We do need H2s. We need more people. We're going to have more volume and a lot more volume of work. It's already building up. If anybody's driven out on Route 3 and looked at Finnegayan, the base, they're going to build minimum of 200 buildings out there. It's going to be a brand new base. Just a huge endeavor. And all of that is going to require people, housing, you folks' business. It's really going to be, Guam's going to change, and we're going to need more help. So the H2 program is very important to us, and that's why we've litigated against USCIS, and we've kind of won, but I don't know if you ever really win against the government per se. They have other ways of slowing us down, I guess, on the H2 program. We've tried to speed up the program. People are struggling trying to get H2s. They spend a lot of money to get H2s approved. And then out of the blue, the Homeland Security decides that they're not going to let Filipinos be H2s. And, you know, here we go. People, companies have spent, construction companies have spent a lot of money prepping workers and then getting stopped or turned down. Now, I'm not saying we're not getting H2s. The NDA allows us to use construction H2s on base and anything related to base buildup. So it's pretty open, but it's slow. It's taking us time. And we need support and we need help. And that's been a good thing. I know the real estate group has helped with our litigation and help with funding, and we definitely appreciate that. And that's, Greg will get into the meat of it, but that's kind of an overview. Thank you.
I think everybody agrees that Bill Berry is just a wealth of knowledge. Obviously, from the real estate standpoint, why are we concerned about labor and construction? It's because we are at that point now where we're just taking the inventory that we have and we're sloshing it around between buyers and sellers, and we're not increasing at the numbers we should, the number of units out there, so people can enjoy the joy of home ownership. So we need to get more things built faster. At this time, I'd like to introduce Greg Massey, who is the administrator of the Guam Department of Labor's Alien Labor Processing and Certification Division. Talk about being an expert. He's been doing it for 3 decades. He's given these talks. He gave me the PowerPoint presentation. Then things changed. He revised it. He just changes slides. He's always on the ready to impart information, to keep everybody abreast on what's going on. At this time, a warm welcome, please, for Greg Massey.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I could do like 3 hours, but we're only doing 20 minutes, so I'm gonna breeze through a whole bunch of these slides real quickly and maybe allow for some time for some questions. But basic H-2B process, I'll let you guys read the slides, but in essence, there's 4 steps. One, you're gonna have to file with Department of Labor. You go through a recruitment process. U.S. workers have to be offered the jobs first. Then after that, and all the documents that come with that process, the Director of Labor then makes a recommendation to the Governor of Guam, who then is the one that actually approves what's called a temporary labor certification. Once you get the labor certification, you file with USCIS, which is U.S. Immigration. And if you get approved by U.S. Immigration, which has been the sticking point recently, then your workers would then go to the embassy and get their actual H-2B visas. And then the last part of the process is once the workers arrive in Guam, then they would have to be registered with the Department of Labor and get an H-2B ID card. Okay, now that was like 3 hours of my in what, 2 minutes? Current H-2B situation. So I'm not going to go, basically, if you guys don't know what H-2 is a temporary non-agricultural worker. Typically in Guam, they're used for construction. We've had foreign workers ever since World War II, but the H-2 program, in essence, in its current form, has been since about 1985. And we've had pretty much a 95% approval rate for the past 30 years until 2015 and 16, when denial started happening. So right now there's basically, after the GCA lawsuit and after the National Defense Authorization Act, there's basically 3 different paths that we call. One would be the regular process that's with no special considerations, and for the most part, we haven't seen any approvals through that process, but with the caveat that there's a chilling effect right now. During 2015 and 16, contractors tried their best to show what's called temporary need. H-2 is a temporary visa, and it's a lot more complicated, and that's another 2 hours of my 5-hour thing, and I'm gonna skip it. But basically, you have to show temporary need based off of these 4 different categories, and it's super hard. Okay, it wasn't hard for 30 years, but all of a sudden in 2015, it became hard. So that's the regular process. So what happened? GCA, as Bill had said, sued USCIS, U.S. Immigration, basically saying why for 30 years was H-2B okay, and then all of a sudden in 2015 it's not okay. You know, why was the need temporary for 30 years, and in 2015 now it's not temporary? What changed? And that's the gist of the lawsuit. So what happened was the judge agreed to put a temporary injunction on USCIS to establish the status quo while they hear the merits of the case. I'll go into that in a little bit. And then there's the NDA exemption, and that's basically in the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act. The military went to bat for us and for themselves too, but and they basically got legislation passed that for H-2 you don't have to prove temporary need. Okay, so it exempted temporary need and basically opened up the gates again to H-2. So regular process, like I said, current approval rate is 0, but there's a chilling effect. Because contractors tried so hard and they got denied 100%, no one wants to file. So is USCIS denying? Well, no, because no one's filing. Okay, so we encourage people to file under the regular process and see it. For all we know, it might be fixed. But at this point in time, nobody's here under the regular method. Class member of GCA, that Monday this week, GCA went into a court hearing. Basically, the GCA is trying to say that USCIS is in contempt of the court order, and I guess we're going to wait for the judgment from the federal court on that. So I'm really blowing by these. Each one of these is complicated, but I'm just giving you cliff notes. But the important one is the NDAA exemption right now. And basically what that is the law says if your contract, so the first thing is you have to have a contract. So if your contract is directly connected to or associated with the military realignment occurring on Guam, that you don't need to prove temporary need. Okay, that exemption is good until 2023, and right now we have a 100% approval rate on those. In order to get that exemption, though, you have to have a letter from Department of Defense. Now, we have worked it out with local, and it's local DOD that's doing the letter. So we've worked it out where the letter request comes through my office, we vet it out, we send it up to DOD, and then it goes through a process with them and then comes back out through my office. One of the big misconceptions, and one of the things I wanted to talk about today, wait, let's see what I have here. Okay, we're going to the Philippines this day. One of the biggest misconceptions, everyone thinks that the NDA exemption is just for military contracts or has to be directly connected to the military. That's not true. We've got 100 workers on the Sabaki Hotel right now. That's not a military contract. I had one realtor in my office the other day who, I won't say his name, but basically he's building an apartment, someone's building an apartment complex. I think DOD's gonna sign off on that, okay? I even think DOD will sign off on single family homes. But everyone I tell that, they're like, really? Really? Yeah, really. But, again, how far are you going to stretch that NDA exemption? If I'm going to build, say I get a home loan to build a house for me to live in, is that connected to the military realignment? Probably not. But let's say I'm building a home that I'm going to put on the market for rental, say for instance. So that's going to go into the real estate inventory, and that's going to offset contractors that may come here and are taking up rental properties. It's going to take up military service persons who are moved out of base housing because they're renovating base housing. Of course it's associated with the military buildup. It's not directly connected to, but it's associated. So I'm encouraging everyone in here, everybody in here is realtors. If you've got contractors that are building homes, or if you're involved in home building, it doesn't cost anything to put in that request to my office and try, see. If DOD says I'm not going to sign off, it doesn't cost you anything. No harm, no foul. But you might just get that approval. And once you get that approval, so far we've seen, of course we're going to help you. We're going to look at your request, and if it doesn't make sense, then we'll work with you on it. Anything you can tie to the SEIS, the Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement, I'm pretty sure DOD is going to be favorable in signing off on. Okay, so I'm waiting for the card that says my time's up. Okay, so the other issue we have right now is, so recently the Philippines was taken off the list of approved H-2B countries. Is it a ban? No, everybody keeps calling it a ban. It's not a ban. What it does, though, is it really ramps up the vetting. So you have to have the names up front. Before, when you applied for H-2s, you didn't have to have the names up front. Okay, now you have to have the names up front. That's one of the things that happens when you're not on the list. But other than that, we found that the NDAA exemption helps get the workers approved. And have we tested it? Yes. We've got several companies that have already brought in workers from the Philippines, or have gotten approved for workers from the Philippines. And actually, I think yesterday I saw a couple that came in that petitioned after this removal of the Philippines from the list. So is it doable? Yes. Is it harder? Yes. If you're going to bring in H-2s, I'm also encouraging bringing in H-2s from other countries that, aside from the Philippines, that are on the approved list. We actually have somebody from a Texas recruiter that's on island right now that's going to be talking to contractors about sourcing workers from Mexico. I think they're playing around with Jamaica. What was the other one? A couple other countries. So now if you bring in from, again, just like Philippines before, if you get from a country that's on the list, you don't have to name the workers up front. And as long as you got that NDA exemption, it's pretty much almost a sure bet that you're gonna, as long as you got your paperwork in order. The days of easy H-2, they're over. They stopped in 2016. You make sure that you got good legal advice, or if you're doing your own petitions, that you know exactly what you're doing, because it's not just a matter of filling out a form and getting your H-2 to arrive. It's a lot more complicated these days. The other thing that the other thing I wanted to talk about was workforce housing. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this stuff, but since I'm talking to a room full of realtors and senators, workforce housing is an issue right now. When the build-up first was envisioned, there was Ukudu Workforce Village. That's up there in Two Lovers Point area, and it's this huge facility with 18,000 beds, and we would never need workforce housing. Well, after build-up 1 fizzled, we called it build-up 1, Cortec bought up that facility, and they're using it for their own purposes now. So there aren't any really large workforce housing facilities out there. There's some, but not enough, not as much as we need. So I'm encouraging everyone to, if you're developing properties, develop workforce housing. I'm encouraging senators to maybe pitch some legislation that would make it easier. Right now, workforce housing has to be in an M1 zone exclusively. Maybe there might be some ideas out there about opening up other zones, because it is difficult. I spoke to several people about developing barracks type facilities, and they're like, well, we can't find the right places in these M1 zones. So something to think about. Looking over at speaker there, But that's, of course, that's going to have to be built by, private industry. But I think that there might be ways that the legislature can help with incentives, whether it's zoning laws or whether it's maybe, there's a lot of ideas out there. Try to not to get myself in trouble here, but if, let's say that we built a facility on somebody's government of Guam's land, maybe there could be an after use for it. Like one of the concepts that's been put out there is if we build a workforce, like say a barracks type facility, and then there's an after use plan, and then maybe 10 years from now, when that's turned over to the government of Guam, maybe we have a storm shelter now that we don't have to start opening up the schools every time a storm comes, that you would have a storm shelter, and that would be the after use. There's a whole bunch of ideas out there that could be put out. Oh God, I even put it on my PowerPoint. Okay. I don't know if my director saw this first, so sorry, Dave. That's pretty much, I just got some pictures. I didn't know how long I was going to be allowed to speak, and Peggy told me she'll be putting up the sign, and I don't see a sign, so I'm just going to fly by these pictures real quick. This is just so you know, Guam has one of the strongest H2 programs in the nation, I think. I was speaking to this lady from Texas today who she deploys H2s all over the country from all different countries, and she says it's just, there's almost no enforcement going on in the U.S. mainland. But with us, we got people that go out. I've got inspectors that go out every week, and if you say you're going to build something in Jigo, we're going to go out to Jigo and we're going to check. This was Route 3. We even go to single-family homes, so probably a lot of your contractors are saying, hey, those labor guys showed up. As long as everyone's legal, it's all good. If they're not legal, then we're going to enforce the law so that way the federal government knows that when they approve H2s in Guam, we're not going to have fraud and abuse. This is just a guy out there. Normally, we're out there looking for their H2 ID cards. That's the ID card that you'll see a lot of the workers doing. We do make sure that if you're a cement mason and you're brought in for a cement mason, you're doing only work as a cement mason and not as, in this case, this guy was working as a painter, and the company got a fine for that. If you're illegal, we will work with U.S. ICE, and we'll make sure that, if you're not supposed to be here, then you're not here. That's just me on top, and I was scared, trust me. So it's just us checking workers. We do barracks inspections. That is the inside of, I won't say the company name, Cortex Barracks. Because the next picture was, like, you guys all know who it was anyway. But yeah, no, that's basically the only real barracks facility that's out there, which is managed by Cortec. They have, I think, 1,000 worker capacity, and they do have the largest workforce right now. That's their dining facility. And then this is just a picture of people actually getting their H2 ID cards while they come to our office. Okay, and that's it for me. Any questions later?
Boy, you are a wealth of knowledge. Good. It blew right through those things. There's always an alternative to where you get the guest labor workforce. We have had tunnel vision for many, many years looking to the Philippines. There's a lot of commonality among people from the island nation of the Philippines and people from Guam. English is pretty much the people of the Philippines' second language. English is pretty much our first language, but it works out culturally, socially, and for years. But I got firsthand experience from lots of conversation with somebody who became a new member of my family, that there may be other island nations that we might want to actually consider. And so I'm still trying to figure out how this person became my grandson-in-law. But he snuck in there, and after looking at him, he's got all the attributes I don't have. I'm not tall, I'm not dark, and I'm not handsome. And he's all of those things, so we're very fortunate to have him. He's from the island nation of Fiji. He dressed in his, I guess, native, not costume, but the clothing, I guess, attire. I think Liz Duenas liked it, kept checking his legs out, so anyway. So he's going to discuss attributes that his mother country, the island nation of Fiji, may have to offer to our community. His name is Viliami Vitibu please, Billy, please come forward. He's my grandson-in-law. Thank you. Warm welcome.
Thank you. I almost cried with that introduction. Hi, my name is Viliame Voitimbao, but I'm from Fiji, and I'm here to talk to you about the prospect of Fiji becoming a recruiting site or country. Sorry, the slide's about to start. Oh.
Presentation keyed up? Yeah. Okay, so the machine's over there.
Sorry.
Who tripped over that?
So what do I press? Oh, sorry.
What's the magic button?
Oh, there. Sorry, Fiji is a recruiting option. Now, Fiji is part of Melanesia. As you all can see, I'm Melanesian. It's a group of about 300 islands located 3,000 miles southeast of Guam. Even though it's that close, we still have to take 2 plane rides to get to Guam from Fiji. There's no direct flight. The population is about 884,887, and most of which are Fijians. We also have Indians and a few other races. Now, our workforce consists of about 62% of our population. That comes up to about 550,000 people. And 56% of those are willing to take a job where they would get better pay. That is the consensus in Fiji. That is why we have a major brain drain, but at the same time, we have people that are always going up through the ranks. Fiji's minimum wage is about $1.50 US, so anything that is offered here in Guam would be considerably greater than what we can get in Fiji. And we have an unemployment rate of 8.75%. Now, this unemployment rate is due to politics in Fiji. Most people don't believe this unemployment rate. They actually think that it is higher. So it could be higher than 8.75%, but my research, this is what we came up with. Now, from this, about 5 to 10% of those have been in construction and civil engineering, and 2% in the healthcare sector. These numbers include everyone from whoever, like for in the construction industry, could be a guy who's picking up nails on site to an engineer in between projects. And the same thing goes for that 2%. So we do have people that are willing to take jobs overseas, and we also have people who are unemployed that would most likely take up a job overseas as well. Now, we have 11% of those people that are unemployed have completed high school. High school in Fiji is a little bit more strenuous than here on Guam or on the mainland because we have an exit exam. And everyone in their final year of high school go through this exit exam, which includes basically AP level math and high level English. So everyone that you might get over here that are recruited will probably speak English as well as I am right now, as well as reading and understanding English. So language barriers should be non-existent. These are our 4 main institutions that contribute to construction workers and the healthcare sector. University of the South Pacific can be compared to the University of Guam in terms of, that's where we get our lawyers, our doctors, etc. Fiji National University, same thing with our doctors. Most of our nurses, teachers, and construction workers come from the Fiji National University, and we even have schools that specialize in those areas in the Fiji National University. The Australian Pacific Technical College can be compared to Guam's Trades Academy. They encourage most people who are already in the industry to come in, either renew their skills, learn new skills. So if you do recruit from Fiji, most of the certificates or any sort of certifications, you'll see one of these 4 logos on them. Now, recruitment in Fiji has occurred or began in 2003. We have various countries that have recruited from Fiji, whether it is small scale, probably 2 people, to a large scale of 30 at one time. Our major markets would be the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom in terms of military, and the United Arab Emirates. Our most developed recruiter or country that's recruiting from Fiji would be the United Arab Emirates. Currently, I think they have about 300 workers, 10% of which are nurses, and the 10% of nurses and other occupations, like we have pilots from Fiji who go out and work for the Emirates. We have teachers who teach English as well as other subjects. So there's a very large group of people that you can recruit from, not only for construction or healthcare, teachers, whatever else that you may need. Just a quick pros and cons. Personally, I think there should be no hindrance in terms of transition from coming from Fiji to living here on Guam. I personally find that it's almost like Fiji in terms of climate. The people are very friendly, and so there shouldn't be an issue there. There should be no language barrier, or very limited. Most people in Fiji speak English. We have 3 main languages, but schools all operate in English. We all learn to read and write, so that shouldn't be a problem. And there is a recruitment process already that exists. The Fiji government currently allows countries to recruit from Fiji, even though they have a brain drain problem, which we still don't understand why they do that, but it occurs. When trying to get information about this, I called up a friend who works for the Public Works in Fiji, and he said over the last month we sent over 8 people to the CNMI, 8 construction workers, so it continues to occur. Now the cons of this is the cost of travel. If you are getting people from Fiji, considering that they're taking at least 2 plane rides, it's going to be costly. Accreditation of the institutions, while they do have schools, like the Fiji National University has a School of Construction and Civil Engineering, not all their courses are certified or accredited, while like the carpenter or the carpentry school might get an accreditation, that accreditation does not follow through all the way up to the top. The other issue is remittance. The Fiji government does not have any rules and regulations in place to force people to remit back to Fiji, but due to the culture, I mean, as we all know, Fijians would most likely remit back to Fiji whatever money that they're able to make here. Yes, that is my presentation. I hope it was short enough for you. Any questions before I? No?
Wait, I will invite my other guest speakers up and then open the floor to questions for any one of them. Please, we got move this along, so don't be mamalau. Marcel? Mr. Camacho, sir?
This might be more appropriate for Bill of the Guam Contractors Association. In relation to bringing in labor, is there a reason why we can't attract U.S. labor, and why we're so focused on H-2 labor?
Primarily, the U.S. labor force is shorthanded too, and they make a lot more money hourly, so it's really hard to attract. We get U.S. support from California and different places, Oklahoma, Texas, but they're short term because they're typically very expensive. Hawaii is overloaded with work, and so we can't, they're not interested in coming. We're kind of the Lone Ranger out here in terms of we gotta grab what we can grab. So that's why we're taking the H2. We have, there isn't been I was very interested in Bill's presentation. I suggested that he give a presentation on Fiji to GCA, I think we're open to any source of manpower, but admittedly, we've done H-2s out of the Philippines or Korea or China for so many years. We know how to do that kind of thing. But it is expensive. H-2s are expensive, no matter how you cut it. Prevailing wage plus the housing, the feeding, transportation, medical, yep,
And even repatriation bonds and wage bonds are different from nation to nation.
yeah. So it's an expensive process. We'd much rather use locals, but when you run out of locals and you've got a lot more work coming, the H-2s become very much important.
Next,
Next question? There you go.
Deanna.
So I have a couple of questions, actually. Does the Trades Academy have a program for surveyors?
No. We don't, we have construction trades where they learn how to read plans and apply it in the field. But in terms of surveying, no, that's engineering. Now, I'm not sure if they've started it, but University of Guam now has an engineering college, and they will have surveying.
So our surveyor group have been in business for a long time. Eventually, they're going to retire, and they're like two young guys. We're not going to have any surveyors here in the next 5 or 7 years. It's going to be a problem. So just bringing it up as a possibility. And then on the H-2B for medical nurses and doctors, because those also kind of stopped in 2015. So is that not growing fast because, why? I mean, we're focused a lot on construction, but we also have needs on the medical side.
So in the 2019 NDAA, there's an exemption for nurses. Oh, actually, no, it's for all allied healthcare workers, provided that the facility that they're going to be working in serves both military and civilians. So H-2 for health industry is wide open right now. The problem is, honestly, the prevailing wage for nurses is super high right now, and it's more than what I think the industry can. I think it's up to like $38 an hour, or something like that. Typical RNs are in the $25 to $28 range. So that's why you're not seeing a bunch of H2 nurses, but it's not the law that's stopping it. It's just the industry. I mean, you could bring in allied healthcare workers at any time. You know, it's wide open right now.
Any other questions? I have one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we do mind. Next.
Within the Trades Academy, if you can, Mr. Berry, if you can actually let us know, what are the main categories that people are graduating with, if you don't mind?
We've been really had a lot of electrical, HVAC, air conditioning, skill sets that people take. We've had an increase in what we call construction craft labor, where they learn the basics of construction, and that's been a big seller. And project management, in other words, all the paperwork, how do you support a construction effort? And that's the primary.
How many carpenters, masons, and reinforced metal workers are actually graduating? Because according to the numbers that I've seen from Mr. Massey, we have a need eventually to reach up to 4,000 workers, and a majority of them within those three categories. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe you can concur that there are not enough people graduating within those three skill sets.
That's correct. We just started our first in 10 years carpentry class, and we were able to develop a group of apprentices for that program. But you're right, we don't get a big demand for masons, carpentry, iron workers, that sort of thing. It's the harder part of the business. In other words, you're out in the sun and the dirt and you name it. But the construction craft labor program has all of that in it, though. And now they don't become wonderful, but they become better skills. So that is a good program, and that is very popular. So we're working on it.
Well, I can attest that I've hired within our company a few of the GCA Trades Academy graduates, and they've excelled, they're getting better, and we continue to look forward to more from the GCA.
I was asking Bill if he could just enlighten everybody that we've been spending several years trying to expand our educational institution, the GCA Trades Academy footprint, and we got some really good news, so if you could share with them.
We're in the process, hopefully by February of next year, March, we'll be in a new facility, much bigger, about 30,000 square feet of office, classrooms, that sort of thing for the Trades Academy up in Tejan. Compliments of EDA, a federal grant, gave us some money. Now, there's no such thing as free money, but we took advantage of it, and so we're going to get a brand new facility and be able to do more and better. So,
Any more questions?
I think that's good. We need
We
to
have
go.
one right. The same problems. Look at this man right here. There, you see a problem? No. You want to address that?
I don't think there would be a problem. Many other countries have gotten workers from Fiji, and there hasn't been any sort of hindrance since 2003, more or less. So, I mean, I can't predict the future. It is the same process. Fiji is on the list. It is the same process. Fiji has a U.S. embassy, and the same process will occur.
Maria, can you repeat real quick just the question? We got the answer, but can we just repeat the question?
I was just wondering if it was any easier to recruit H-2B workers from Fiji than it was obviously from the Philippines it is, but from anywhere else. But apparently it's the same process.
Last comment.
It will be easier.
Okay.
Thank you, Bobby. Maria, I probably want to add on to your question as it relates to Fiji, then back to Bill. But on the recruitment process, you talked about the certification and how you guys don't have certification. And if the recruitment was supposed to come here, I know that a lot of the projects for building needs to have certified workers. And how do we waive or take the time to I guess, work the reciprocity to work the certification for what is needed for the project? Because even in building houses here, if I'm not mistaken, we need certification. We need certified electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and all that. Am I saying this right? I'm just asking, how would we be able to fix that?
Since I'm labor, I'll take a stab at it. Pretty much the only time you're going to really need any formal certification would be for like some welder jobs on base and stuff. There's no real certification for carpenters and masons. It's nice if they have credentials, and that's what they would get through the educational institutions and through like Trades Academy, but it's mostly experience on the job. If you have so many years experience, then you're a carpenter. But yeah, it's credentialing is not going to be a problem between the like Fiji and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess because Senator Chadwick had brought up another good point about the LEED certifications that were needed for buildings that have to go through energy savings and all that stuff. But the reason why I bring that up is because if we need certified workers, and we want to look at Fiji because there's about 80,000 construction workers, but based on the 10%, there's 884,000 people. If we can, I guess, do a on-the-job or comparable experience, OJT experience, and something to do like what universities do when they clep a student in because of the experience they have, then the years of experience and training converts into the educational process, and that something that legislation can work with. And that's why I bring it up, because if they're not considered certified, then how do we accept them in on our side, especially with the federal contracts that are coming in, and if we're looking for those. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the what happens inside the fence, and the waiver that's provided to the H-2B workers there. I think the governor was right in saying that everything on Guam is related to the military buildup, and as oversight chair for the Guam buildup, I really want to bring that to the forefront so everybody is incorporated so that we can access that, and that's a way that can be circumvented. I always think outside the box. Mr. Camacho will share that with you. I want to make it right for our people and more accommodating and easier. And so if we have to look at those hurdles, I'm not afraid to like Greg said, take a stab at it.
Thank you, Speaker. I know Bobby's kicking us off the stage, so let's just
Thank
go.
you.
Before he gets the hook.
Well, let's give a round of applause for Monty and his guests, Greg, Bill, and Villamy. Thank you. So up next, leading into affordable housing, we have Ronald De Guzman.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm not tall, dark, and handsome. I'm just short and medium chocolate. But it's good to be with everybody this afternoon. We're going to be talking a little bit about affordable housing. I know that's a subject that's near and dear to all of our hearts. Affordable housing on Guam is becoming a misnomer. Supply and demand have driven prices up. A decade ago, our median housing prices were around $175,000. Today, we are approaching $300,000 as median home prices on Guam. Home prices, rentals are quickly becoming out of reach for our local families. And that's some of the discussions that we've been having in the legislative committee with regards to affordable housing and what can be done. Possibly, Senator Speaker and Senator Taitigui, we want to bring to the forefront, we want to bring to the legislature some possible solutions to help with affordable housing. One of the things that all of us realtors in this room today deal with on a daily basis, we get calls and many calls, especially from local families. We need to find a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. And probably all of you can agree with me. We're having a harder time finding units. And one of my concerns is that over time, and I've sounded this alarm many years ago, but over time we have a homeless situation on Guam that will be exacerbated because of the supply and demand. Supply is very limited on Guam. There's a lot of competition from off-island sources, from military, and of course from our local families. So we need to start finding solutions for that now, because many years ago, as a director of GURA, we did a study of the homeless population in Hawaii, specifically with people that are camping out in tents on the beaches and parks in Hawaii. We thought, well, that's just kind of an urban legend, until we actually did the research and found out that these families were camping out on the beaches and in the parks in little tents. And I think the thing that probably shocked me the most was when we did that research, we found out that these are not your typical, we would think, unemployed people, that are not holding down jobs. To my amazement, many of those families were 2-income families, and their average income was about $60,000 a year. And here they were, living in tents, in parks and beaches in Hawaii. And the reason, the primary reason is because the reason why they weren't in housing was because they could not afford it. So we come back to this whole premise of affordable housing. We need to tackle this problem now. We have over 1 million tourist visitors a year, and I don't think they want to come to Paradise and find a bunch of homeless people on our beautiful beaches in our parks. So it's a situation that we are imploring our senators to be proactive, help us to put together legislation that will address this problem now before it becomes worse. And it will only become worse because the population on Guam is expected to increase with the military buildup. So today I'm very excited to bring to you a speaker who you probably all know very well. Just let me give him an introduction. Mr. Carlos Camacho is the founder and executive director of the Micronesian Community Development Corporation. It's a nonprofit corporation providing home ownership, counseling to first-time home buyers, and assisting families to their dream of home ownership. The corporation has helped hundreds of Guam residents to purchase and construct homes, and also develops housing projects designed to prevent marginalization of low to middle income families due to fast economic growth. Mr. Camacho became a partner of Ironwood Development in 2005. The partnership is responsible for the marriage of several federal housing and urban development programs for projects benefiting low to moderate income families. The Internal Revenue Service's low housing income tax credit program was used for the first time in Guam by Ironwood Development and Micronesian Self-Help Corporation, which has benefited over 1,200 households. So please put your hands together for Mr. Carlos Camacho.
Good afternoon. Senators, thank you. I understand this is a legislative forum for the realtors to share their ideas. This is one of the ideas that's been sitting on Guam's legislative books or Guam law for 20 years. And we are the 99-yard line, and for several times, a lot of you realtors saw me do this presentation in the past. I never disclosed it was a mortgage credit certificate because I was kind of selfish, trying to keep that to myself. But I figured nowadays we got to share what's in the books and hopefully grow this economy together and solve this affordable housing crisis we're in. But before I move forward, you know, the word affordable housing is it's just very it's hard to define because when I worked with the legislative policy makers, like at that time was Speaker Barnes, Telo Taidagui, Senator Marcel was senator then, Senator Marsh, you're now a newcomer now. So at that time, a lot of times the legislature would use a number. Affordable housing should not exceed 100,000, 200,000, 150,000. Well, last year, I'm glad Senator Talina Nelson changed the first-time homeowner from 250 to 350. And the reason we did that is inflation keeps going up, cost of goods keeps going up, but that down payment assistance had a ceiling. So I only want to share that because I think one of the things I wanted to do is this program is based on a published income table annually by two federal agencies, HUD and USDA. And when they publish it annually, they publish it based on the individual's household income. And let them figure out their buying power. Everybody's buying power is different. So that's the reason I am asking the senators to never use a fixed number, but use the income table because everybody protects their credit differently. Someone will have zero debt and their buying power could be $300,000. Someone could have debt of $500, as you all know, realtors, when you pre-qualify families, their buying power could be $200,000. And then this is where we come to the dilemma of affordable housing. Well, there's not enough inventory out there because my buyer only qualifies for 200, but there's nobody building at 200 because the cost of goods are up. And this is what you're hearing earlier here that's kind of scaring me, the cost of labor. And Bill knows this. When you have very little, you got a lot of demand on housing, very little supply in labor. You guys all seen the cost of construction going up from $95 to $200 a square foot. So today, the reason why I'm going to show this program is since my 30-year career in this industry, I've been focusing on affordable housing for the very low and the low-income community. That's targeted income, families earning income not more than $40,000 and below. That's what we're doing in Ironwood. That's what we're doing in all the housing I do. But every time I do a presentation to a housing outreach, I still get my middle-income family, which I call the lost gap families. These are the guys earning $60,000, $70,000. These are the guys probably knocking you as realtors and saying, is there anything for me out there? Unfortunately, their buying power is only 290, and all out there is an old inventory that, you know, when at the end of the day, it's going to make the wife to make that decision. So what's good about this program is two things. It's going to increase their buying power to an average of $30,000, and it could be also used as an acquisition rehab, so that your wife or your other spouse can finally have that renovated bathroom when you close that deal. So let me move forward and give you a little overview of the mortgage credit certificate. I'm going to talk about the enabling legislation, how MCC works, who's eligible, how it's treated as tax deduction, and the recapture clause. And today I'm going to target families' income of 115% area median income, and that's income from $70,000 to $103,000. That's that income gap that this program qualifies for. So I'm not talking about low income, I'm talking about the gap families here. And I'm going to show how I qualified these families from what they can buy on an existing situation without MCC, and then I'm going to show what MCC does in a magical world on increasing their buying power. I guess I'm going to change. Oh, you're going to change for me? Thanks. So real quick, I just wanted to make sure, make very clear that this perspective is coming from me as a private developer on a program that sits in Guam's books. This program is administered, again, and it will show later on, by Guam Housing Corporation, and the MCC cap is administered by GITA. GITA is, if you guys noticed, last week they advertised their private activity bond. One of the 5 categories is called the mortgage credit certificate. IRS gives Guam's an annual allocation to provide this for affordable housing. But since the 25th legislature, today's at 35, almost 20 years, it has never been implemented. So hopefully today with this legislative forum, and I see Ed Camacho from GITA, that we can finally get this program going so that we, the industry, could use these programs to grow this economy and give additional buying power to our families. So MCC is an income tax credit. With the MCC, the qualifying buyer is eligible to reduce their amount of income tax liability equal to the portion of the annual interest paid. So if you guys know the amortization schedule, the typical interest is front-end loaded. Year 1 to year 15 is mostly interest. Year 15 to year 30 is majority little interest principal when you pay down. What this program does is we're going to utilize the front load of the interest and change this individual's buying power to increase their purchasing power to buy their dream home. Next. This program was passed in Congress in 1984 under the Tax Reform Act in the United States Congress. And then in Guam, the 25th legislature, a Homes Task Force was created, and a bunch of the senators that were there, Senator Barnes were there at that time. This was created. They passed the Guam version under Public Law 25111, known as the Mortgage Credit Certificate Program of 2000. Today's 2019. So many policies in the books, but we got to get it going. I'm glad the senators are here so we can have both branches of government work to finally get this home stretched. Again, it is administered by Guam Housing Corporation. I have talked to the new administrative director there already about this program. She's getting her team and DRT ready so they can take the rules and regulations that they've completed the last 8 years from previous administration and probably have their own public hearings so we can upgrade all these antiquated things that's been sitting in the books. The volume cap is annually allocated by GITA. So Ed Camacho, thank you for being here. So this volume cap that you guys see every year, I think for the 5 categories, GITA has over $90 million, if I'm not mistaken, of unused volume cap. That's a lot of money that we can use in our real estate industry. But there's 5 categories, and I'm hoping that the MCC is going to be one of them that we're going to push heavily so we can go after some of those cap. The amount based on Guam law has 2 target markets. The 80% area median income, which they'll give 20% of the interest credit to them for their buying power, and the 81 to 115 area median income that gives 15%. This was Guam law 20 years ago. Senators, I know when you do your public hearing, I am going to testify to increase this because this is 20 years ago. And our inflation keeps going up. So for some reason, this has not been inflated yet. So this is based on Guam law. But I'm going to just use this exercise right now. That's on Guam law right now. The credits directly applied to homeowners W-4, thereby increasing the monthly take-home pay. There are several methods to use the MCC. So today's exercise, I'm going to use one of the methods where their annual taxes are reduced by that MCC credit, and it's changed into their income limit. Their income will increase by that 20% or 15%, and I'll show you how that improves their debt ratio. Every year, you file an IRS Form 8396. That's when you do your amendment on your W-4. I am not a tax advisor, but later when this gets implemented, the tax advisor should know what to do to amend the individual homeowner's tax situation so that the banks can recognize the credit so they can increase their buying power. The lender takes into consideration the new revised income from the home buyer due to MCC credit. Now, let me just show you that exercise later, but that's that. Who is eligible for this? Based on Guam law, it's first-time homeowner. And that is defined in Guam law. You got to be here for 5 years, and you got to go to revenue tax and get there's a letter you get that you are not a homeowner. And once you get that, you qualify to be a first-time homeowner based on Guam law. And again, it's targeted for 80% to 115 area median income. And the home must be the buyer's principal residence. Next. The mortgage creditor can still claim the remaining amount of annual mortgage interest paid as a tax deduction. So remember, without MCC, all interest paid, they can do a tax deduction of the full value. But now that if they took 20% of that 10,000, they still got 8,000. They can still apply that 8,000 towards their tax deduction under the new Trump tax rules. And the 20 will be used as MCC. MCC may be subject to recapture clause. This is very important. You got to stay in your unit for 9 years. But in the event you have to leave and you sell your home in the 3rd year, whatever interest credit you receive year 1, year 2, year 3, when you sell it, before you get your share of your equity, you would pay that back to the government of Guam because they helped you get a home. But after 9 years, you don't have to pay back that MCC credit. So 9 years is the triggered timeline. So let me just show an example of a targeted income family of 115. And I'm going to use that on my case study here. Next. So this is the income table for the area median income of 115. Family 1 to 4, gross annual income of 78,200. These are the guys anyways cannot qualify for my affordable housing. These are the guys I call the lost middle. This is the guys that can't even qualify to buy a 300, 400,000 home because their income is only that capped at 78. But families of 5, 6, 7, and 8, their total household income can go up to 103,000. 103,000. So let's go to the next slide. Again, as I explained earlier, the same target group are telling me that, Carlos, I can't qualify for your subsidized housing. I can't qualify to the market housing today because I make too little money. So what can we do? So this is the next slide. So here's an example of family of 4 whose family's gross income is 70,000, and they have an existing debt of $750 a month. Let it be personal loan, credit card, auto loan, all that stuff. And in order for them to qualify for the Rural Development 100% financing program, they must meet a front ratio of 29 and a back ratio of 41. And from there, see where they go. This family will seek an assistance of a licensed real estate agent to find a home, utilizing the Rural Development 100% financing program. Let's go to the next slide. So the families went out. They went to the bank to pre-qualify under the existing 2941 at a $70,000 income, all this family could qualify for is $290,000. That's all they could qualify for. Ratios are okay, they're within reach, 2940, so that's what they can qualify for. Oh, some sexy, okay, sorry. Next. So they found a house in Jigo, right? The wife loves this house, but it's listed at $320,000. The seller won't budge on price, but the buyer's working with a real estate agent. Buyer wants to pre-qualify once more for the 320 home. Remember, originally they qualified for 290, but now they want to go back and see really if they can qualify. Next. They went back to the bank, the lender that does it, and if you look at the ratio on the bottom for the 320, they exceed the qualifying ratio to buy this home, which is 3142. So they don't get those. They wouldn't get this home. But I'm going to show you a little trade secret before we use MCC. Next slide. Throughout my industry, does anybody here in the real estate industry know about the 10-month rule? Anybody know about the 10-month rule? A few hands. For those who don't know, the 10-month rule is a very good tool to use, because if you know about the 10-month rule, any debt that's 10 months and below, you can request the bank to remove that debt from their qualifying ratio. So that's good information to know, you realtors. Any debt 10 months below. Okay, so if you calculate the remaining balance of their loan and it's 11 months, I always tell my borrower, ask a friend or your mom and dad to pay 1 month in advance for your loan. So you meet the 10-month rule, and that can trigger the ratio to be changed. But if in the event it does not change, let's assume it did not change, so that did not work. Then it's the what-if strategy. You guys know, a lot of personal loans now, the banks changed from my time 20 years ago up to $50,000. So imagine reconsolidating all your small debt, 4,000, the 4,000, the 4,000, right? And hopefully you restructure that payment. That could work and change your debt ratio. But let's assume that didn't work also. That didn't work and it didn't work. So number one, work. Finally, the loan officer just found out about a new first-time homeowner program. And let's see how this helps. So remember I told you we got to figure out what the amortization schedule is. So you take the 320. I'm using a 4% rate. I know the rate today is 3.675, but for this exercise, I'm using a 4% interest rate. You take the 320, and you do a 30-year amortization schedule. And let's go to the next slide. On that 30-year amortization, I'm always conservative, so I use the fourth year table, which is the interest. Interest here is about $12,000 for that year. And this program is a 15% MCC program right there. So they can readjust their W-4 by $1,800 annually. Now let me just tell you, 1,800 divided by 12 is $151. It sounds so minute, but let me tell you what it does. Next. Now, for the same family's income at $70,000, for the same loan amount at $320, look at the debt ratio, 2940. Same income. I didn't increase his income. I just changed his interest earned to a tax credit. And right here in the bottom, you see MCC. So what it does, it lowers your PITI by that amount monthly. So in this case, it lowered the PITI by $151. And that's why now you see the debt ratio has improved. And what you just did for your client went from 290 to 320. Next. So what we just did here, the benefits of MCC, we lowered their PITA from $1,849 a month to $1,698. We improved their buying power from 290 to 320. We gave them an additional 30,000 buying power, or we provided expanded inventory. So let's say that when you went to your multiple listing service and you only had 12 listings at the 290, they didn't like that, but they loved that Jigo one. Well, they were able to go to the next tier of your MLS of 320 and see what other inventories are available. So that helps you sell your product. Again, it's only offered to the first-time homeowner. And what's missing in this bullet is it's also qualifies as acquisition rehab. So they can still buy your $290,000 with a loan for $320 to renovate the kitchen or the bathroom, not to exceed the $320 total loan amount. Next. So this is the part for the legislature side now, because whenever you give out tax credits, everybody say, wow, you're going to lose money for GovGuam. And I just wanted to make sure it's very clear, when we give this tax credit out to a homeowner, it creates an economic multiplier effect. And this is what I'm going to show. And this is what I showed to Reverend Tax, and they liked it, because there are times when the legislative policy will give out tax credits, but it's not for no economic value return. This is the kind of tax credits I like, because it brings back some economic value and some cash flow back to this government. Now, let's just look at the same $320,000 loan. Interest paid on the 30 guys loan, you guys don't know, by the time they sign their loan, it's $500,000 in the 30th year. But not only that, you got taxes to revenue tax, the real property, unless they raise it. You got insurance company that insures the home, and the homeowner maintains the home because they own their pride of home ownership. So the total, this is just my first layer of economic impact. My total layer is $681,000 of economic activity infused in purchasing this real estate for $35,000 tax credit throughout the 30-year term. So that is a 19.32 times economic multiplier. So that I think I hope the legislature will see the economic value when you guys finally pass the rules and regulation. I know there will be some. The others are not here, but whenever you give out $30,000 in tax credit, remember it's only given out unless you purchase a home. So it's not given out for free. It's given out when you purchase a home. So there will be some economic multiplier. So we hopefully get your support in passing the final leg of this one. So new dollars to the economy. This is new capital infused by Freddie or Fannie. Banks make servicing fees and spreads. Capital recycles back to the relending community. Trickle-down effect, realtors, escrow, appraisers, inspectors, material supply companies, developers like myself. I have to make a profit, right? Cable, TV, yard maintenance, and groceries, and more. Whenever you build a home, there's a lot of economic activity, and you realtors all know that. Next. Job sustainability, insurance and banks, revenues, supply chain, real estate-related industries, new aggregate value for GovGuam. I think they're listening to a bill today to borrow more money for the landfill. And I think we reached our cap ceiling. But if we sold 100 more homes a year, our debt ceiling capacity will increase because there's more inventory in the real estate industry. For the government to assess. And government revenues, GPA, waterworks, and real property tax. So this is the status of the program. Guam Housing has already got the rules and regs almost 8 to 10 years ago. For some odd reason, I'm not sure why they never took it to the touchdown line. It stopped at the 99-yard line and nobody pushed it. All it needs is for their board to go out and put a public hearing on the rules and regs, which hopefully all of you guys will participate. And since that rules and regs is 20 years old, we would have to look at how do we modify that to today's current situation. And once the public hearing is done, it's sent down to the legislature for ratification and approval, or amendments, as you guys can do, right? You guys can do amendments and rules and regs. And once they approve it, it goes to the governor for final signature. So that's it on my presentation. I hope that opens up a lot of eyes on giving everybody an additional $30,000 on buying power. Thank you very much. Please stay for questions. Any question? I know that's a lot of information overload. Go Go ahead. Okay, her question is, in the event they use this program and in the third year they decided to leave and sell their home, the 9-year recapture clause, are you guys familiar with USDA subsidized housing loan? Or even after 30 years, when they sell it, there's a recapture clause on the subsidy? Very similar, but this one only has 9 years. And it's going to be recorded on land management on a date. So whenever someone does an updated PTR, it will show the time it got recorded. And if it's 9 years, then that doesn't apply. But in this case, your question, what happens to the third year? So remember that $151 or $1,800 I showed you annually? Well, every year there's a different interest schedule, right? Because there's a 30-year schedule. So in the third year, whatever that interest that you use to help you pay for this home, let's assume it's a straight line, 1,800, 1,800, 1,800. Let's make it 2,000 because I'm my math right now. So $6,000 of 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. If you sold it in the third year, you would have to repay back to Gov Guam the $6,000. If you held it for 9 years, on the anniversary of 9 years, and you own it and you sold it on the 10th year, there's no recapture clause. Oh, every Freddie Mac loan is a first-time homeowner loan. I know a lot of you guys rent your homes, and there's not enough inspectors to verify if you're really staying in your home. So I'm not going to answer that question. But there's a lot of Freddie Mac portfolio here that's supposed to be residentially owned, but they're renting it. But that's not my question. You don't have to ask a question. The title still shows is yours whenever you're going to sell it, and that's when the 9-year trigger. But regarding renting it, I don't. That's just my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. We've used this program in Hawaii, and it's great. It's very successful. Thank you for bringing it. My question was kind of along with hers. Is there any hardship? I mean, is this 9 years a federal thing, or is there any way we can change it? It's federal, right? It's a federal regulation? Okay, and my other question, is there any hardship excuses, like if you have to sell it for a hardship reason?
You know, I have no access to the rules and regs. Let's wait till Guam Housing publicizes that, and let's find out on maybe they have some examples on the recapture clauses, and that's why we have a public hearing process. So, like you and the realtors that say if there's a hardship and it's sold, maybe there's a 50% waiver. I don't know, but since the rules and regs are not adopted, that's where we will look for one of those questions and either add it to that as a clause, or we'll see what happens. I can't answer that.
Some banks did not touch that program. This having a recapture
I apologize. I am not Guam Housing Corporation. But but that's a good point to ask during the public hearing process. So those guys that sit in that table, we're in the private site. Good question. We'll ask them about that scenario because they're the agency that underwrites the first-time homeowner program. So with that experience you just explained, maybe they would learn what to do to modify this recapture clause. So I'm sorry I can't make any suggestion or claim because I will be with you in the other side of the table asking the question too.
Any further questions? Okay, we have one more.
Hi. I bumped into some issues where I have had the gap buyers wanting to purchase a condominium. And, there are a lot of affordable condominiums out there. But unfortunately, Fannie and Freddie do not support condominiums that do not have their homeowners associations, maybe the insurance isn't fully qualified. And I think that's a really huge issue because if there are a lot of affordable condominiums that are out there for these gap buyers, but they're still not able to buy it. So what happens is the bank approves them, but has to go towards a portfolio loan, but they have to front 20%. So it pushes them away from, the what you're talking about here. So would there be something that can assist them when it comes to that, where Freddie and Fannie loans will be acceptable to it, or is there any way where condominiums can understand that, to start pushing for better insurances as a full homeowners to where that would cover it?
That's a good question because I also saw that dynamics when condominiums pricings are a lot more affordable than single family pricing or townhouse pricing because townhouse is defined as single family. So based on my research, condos require called a 51% ownership ratio before Freddie Mac can come in. So whoever's the association, if they can document, the key word is 51% ownership on a condo project, then Freddie Mac and Fannie can participate, to my knowledge. But no more? Okay, they corrected me. I've been away from this 20 years.
It's the insurance, the lack of typhoon insurance. You can't get a Freddie or a Fannie if you don't have typhoon insurance for the entire complex.
Okay, so I'm not sure how to answer that because that's not my forte. But it's a good one. I thought it was a 51% test. That was a long time ago. Erase that, okay. Sorry. But I can tell you this. Freddie Mac is one of my investors in my project in Guam, out of Washington, D.C., so I can ask a question. Yeah.
It's Mr. Mac, that's what she says.
Freddie Mac.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Camacho?
I am doing one utilizing MCC. I'll be fully honest, but it's this earlier presentation of the cost of labor. It's the variable because even if I build a project and the cost of labor brings me at $200 a square foot, the individual buying power, the 60, 70, doesn't matter if I get 30,000 extra MCC. It will never cover the gap. So that's my dilemma right there as a developer.
All right.
So it's a labor cost.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Everybody, a round of applause. And also for Ronald Guzman, please. Okay. Up next, we have Mr. Carl Peterson, as I like to call him, my Uncle Carl.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You know, we were just talking about recapture before I go to my presentation. I hope everybody understands what recapture means in an ordinary sale or ordinary mortgage. You buy a building, you depreciate it down to zero. When you sell it, you recapture all that as ordinary income. Some people are very disappointed about the amount they can put in their pocket once they find out what their tax is going to be. Okay, go ahead. No, I'm going to hear. Oh, it's here. Okay. It's not working. Can you do it? Can you do it? Okay, slide. We'll see if this works. I don't know why it's not working. It's got to be plugged in. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, just do it by hand. Go ahead with the next slide. And you're going to have to hit it a couple. We're going to talk about the impact of taxes, fees, and regulations as it applies to all of us in this room and all the people in Guam that have a job that files taxes. So what happens to our community with each new law, each fee, each tax, unfunded mandate, and costly compliance? What happens? Next question. It increases the cost of living for everybody. No matter what it is, it increases our cost of living, and we have to deal with it. We have an extra cost. I'm going to be asking some questions, and I just want you to shout out your answer, no matter what it is. Usually it's a guess, so don't be shy. So, next. Before we get started, I want to share some trivia with you. Next. Say that you have $1. It doubles each year for 20 years. Guess how much money you'd have in 20 years? Anybody? Okay. That's not decipherable, but I'll give you the answer. The answer is $1,048,576. But that's not the question. The question is, if the increase each year was taxed at 31%, total taxes that you have to pay, how much would you have left? Don't change it yet. How much would you have left of the $1,048,000? You know, in other words, from $1 to $2, that instead of $2, you'd have $1.69 because the tax is 31%, right? So each time that it increases, the increase is taxed. Now, how much do you think you would have left? 59%? 69%? Anybody else? Okay, well, you're going to be a bit surprised, perhaps, because this is the answer. That's all you would have left of $1,048,000. Now, this is something you can go home and work out for yourself because you won't believe it. So I sure didn't. But all you would have left at 31% tax rate out of $1,048,000 is $37,113.13. Do taxes have an impact on your wealth? In this case, your wealth was impacted, just $1,048,000, but your wealth was impacted by over $1 million. That's pretty significant. So every tax has an impact. Go ahead. Another question. Where does the government get its revenue? Government gets revenue. Where do they get it? Taxes and what else? Fees. Fees. So if you've got a driver's license, it's a tax on the driver. He has to pay a fee for the license, right? So all the money that the government gets is from taxes or fees. So when does government hiring increase the tax base? That's pretty good. Somebody says no, because it is taxes. They take $1 of taxes, hire you, pay you 80 cents, keep 20, but there's no new revenue. It was taxes to start out with. Very few people stop and think about that, but that's the reality of it. Next. So it's fees and taxes. Next. Here's are some of the taxes that we pay. There's hundreds of them. Go to the next one. And that's just some of the fees. But on the other side there, on the right-hand side, it says there's hundreds of regulatory fees, many federal excise taxes, many, many more times that you pay a fee. You don't even realize that all impacts your cost of living. And so the fees have a big place in our, if you traced, for instance, let's say a can of beans and somebody had to grow the beans. If you traced from the time they planted the seed and cultivated and harvested and back and everything, every person touching those beans is paid and pays taxes, and the company that they work for pays taxes. They're transported and canned and shipped and warehoused and inventoried, and there's a lot of taxes in eat a can of beans. So let's go to the next one. Now, here's a pretty important question. Where does a job come from? Who creates a job? Where does the money come from? Anybody? Where does a job come from? From where? No, that the needs, but where does the job come from? Where does that person that's working there, where does that job come from? Who creates the job, and where does the money come from? Huh? Well, entrepreneurs, yeah, entrepreneurs will create the original jobs, are entrepreneurs. But where does the money come from? Where does the job come from? You know, 4 classes out at UOG could not answer this question, and they were the MBA class, and including the professors. What? Somebody was pretty close, but the answer is all jobs comes from somebody's savings or investment. Somebody had to save some money or invest some money and cash it in. What's another name for that? What's another name for savings? Well, it could be investment too, savings and investment. What is another name for that? Capital, let's call it profit. That means that in order to have some savings, you didn't consume everything that you earned. You might have sacrificed dramatically and really paid the price of sacrifice, but you put it in your pocket and you saved it for a rainy day until it come time that you started your business as an entrepreneur, and you decided to invest that capital and then make some money from it. But all jobs come from profit, somebody's profit. Somebody will say, well, what about AT&T or ExxonMobil or whoever? Where does the job come in their industry? It comes from the individual investors. There's millions of investors in those companies. And when they make $1 profit, maybe they say, we'll take 50% and give it into a dividend. The other 50%, we're going to build a factory in Guam or whatever. they're going to reinvest so that they will have a larger profit next year and can pay. That's how the investors make their money. They have earnings on their investment, and that's how it happened. But it all comes, they use their savings collectively to have more investment and more profit. Okay. What will cause our economy to expand? What are some of the things that make our economy expand? Next. What are some incentives for new capital? Because it's new capital that's going to make the economy expand. Next. Can you name some? Lower taxes would expand the economy. There's more money going to be circulated. Reasonable fees. If there's too many fees, well, then that restricts economy. Less imposing regulations. Great infrastructure will help investment come to Guam. Better educated public will make more people come here because they've got skilled labor. Easy to get a business license. I wish that all the senators could take one of their staff and secretly have them go and apply for a business license. If you will do that and walk through all the, maybe several of you, and for different types of jobs or businesses, and try to get a business license or get a building permit, have another one go get a building permit, and find out how long this takes and how complicated it is, and then pretend that it's $1 billion project, and you're being held up for months on end. The money, holding money has a cost. That cost is going to be passed on to somebody, and so each time there's a delay, the price of the unit cost goes up. So in a way, getting a business license is quite an experience for most people. Or getting the building permit, or a simple way to pay, if there's a simple way to pay your taxes, or many others that lower the cost, improves efficiency, and stimulates competition. The more competition you have, the lower cost you'll have, because everybody's trying to get just look at GTA when it was privatized. All of those companies are out selling phones now. There is so much competition, and they're all trying to get each other's customers. So this is a way to expand the economy. If we're going to have more revenue and more taxes, we have to have a bigger economy. So what would cause our economy to contract? Next. Name a few. Disincentives. Yeah, disincentives. Can you name some? Higher taxes, crime, well, that's not on there. Crime will definitely increase the cost of doing business, a disincentive to do business here. High taxes, labor costs, excessive regulations, onerous requirements. Sometimes you go to one office and they said, well, you got to do this. Go to another office and it'll be some other thing, but you got to do it, otherwise you're not going to get your building permit. Unskilled, poor infrastructure, inefficient costs. High cost of utilities will be a big detriment to economic development. A nightmare to get a business license. Delays, this is a big one. Delays in the GLUC. It should be like a larger board with a less requirement for to make a decision. Because otherwise they just drag on and drag on. I spent 22 years on that when it was a TPC and the TLUC, and you got to speed up. If you want to attract more business, you got to get the approvals done and the requirements. You know, we never see a job that is not created, and rarely do we know that a job is lost. Rarely. Unless it's somebody you know. But are there some examples? Next. What about the tuna transshipment industry? In the 80s, between 5 and 10 tons of fish carcasses had to be removed every week because we processed that many fish. Lots and lots of fish. And at great revenues to us, a lot of employment for us, just all kinds of employments to process fish, get them packed and sent up to the airport or wherever they went. And why did all of these jobs and this revenue leave? Next. Because we imposed a huge expensive docking fee for the ships and heavy fines if they didn't meet the certain criteria. So the fishing industry said, well, we'll go someplace else. You know what they're doing now? They bring their own ships and they offload at sea. They bring out revenue, bring out provisions to sea, at sea, and they change at sea. They said, this is too costly. There's too much competition. We got to find a way to lower the costs, and so they don't even pull in unless it's absolutely necessary. So, well, here's the answer to the next one. Remember Gorko? Why did Gorko make all that big investment with all those tanks and the oil refinery and all those jobs was available? But why did those jobs leave? The reason was that the governor then said, we're going to start imposing a wholesale GRT tax to oil refinery. And Gorko said, oh, well, this is a very competitive business. We cannot afford to pay the GRT. If you impose that GRT, we will have to close shop. It was a big deal. The GRT was imposed, they closed. All that went away. So what happened to it? It left. What about, do you remember the proposed Hagatna Marina? Big development with going to have all kinds of shops. You've probably seen in other countries where they have on their bays or their harbors, they have big developments. We were going to have the same thing. And it was really nice. It was a very large development. But what happened to it? How come it didn't happen? Next. Oh, I guess you can't see it. Okay, well, what happened was, there should be another slide. What happened was the legislature decided that they wanted a lot of rent. And they said, we can't pay a lot of rent. We're going to do the development that's going to create all these businesses. So the moral of the story is, man, that is small. We will never see the business that would have been developed, people who would have been hired, and taxes that would have been paid. If it doesn't happen, you don't see any of that. We may think something is going to cost just a few bucks or a few percent, but in reality, it adds a great deal over time. It's like the taxes on a dollar. A little bit can mean a big difference. So a 25% increase in the GRT or an increase in the minimum wage, they have consequences to everyone, not just realtors. It makes things less affordable. Incentives work much, much better. That's the idea. Next. And lastly, this last slide, for a nation to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket trying to lift himself up by the handle. Pretty accurate, pretty apropos. Next. Thank you. Questions? Hope it was clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carl Peterson. One more round of applause for Mr. Carl Peterson, please. Before we go on to our next speaker, I wanted to ask the senators that are here in the House today to please come up on stage and be recognized and be ready for the second round of that's going to happen right after Mr. Camacho's talk, if you don't mind, just 1 second, okay? First, we have up to the stage the Honorable Tina Muñoz Barnes. She's the Committee of Public Accountability, Human Resources, and the Guam Buildup. Next, we have Senator Clint Rigel. Also, the Honorable Kelly Marsh, Taitano. Senator Jim Moylan. And Senator Tello Taitagui. Thank you. And hopefully we'll have more coming soon. Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay. Now to talk about the processes and impediments to development, we have Mr. Marcel Camacho. Let's give him a hand of applause, please.
Thank you, Bobby. Madam Speaker, senators of the legislature, thank you for the opportunity to share our information with you, information that is near and dear to our heart as members of the Guam Association of Realtors. You're a new legislative body, some of you, and some of you are continuing or have been in the legislature in the past, like Senator Taitagui and Senator Muñoz Barnes. Senator Barnes, thank you again for assisting us in the past with land and housing, and I look forward to you continuing to assist us with good, sound policy that's going to help us grow our economy. I'm sure all of you realize that our membership is strong. We have over 400 members in the Guam Association of Realtors, and collectively we have needs. So my presentation begins by trying to remind everybody that what we need is a partnership between all of you, the legislature, members of the administration, and we in the industry. And the partnership really is for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of the island, so that we can grow collectively and make the island stronger. How do we do this? Well, you as policymakers, what we are looking forward to is you developing reasonable policy. In looking at the past, we've seen policy like a hybrid land use commission, and Carl was able to speak a little bit about the land use commission and how it can be an impediment to we in our industry as developers and contractors. So this hybrid land use commission, it involves more participants when the project gets to a grander scale. But I can also state that I look at two projects that were probably approved in the last year that were contrary, actually, to the benefit of the community. One is a power plant that is situated next to our brand new regional medical city facility, upwind from our most important industry on island, the tourism industry, down in Tumon. And there's all this opportunity for development in that area with the return of excess lands to the original landowners. And so I wonder if the Hybrid Land Use Commission has thought that through, and I often wonder if it's going to be productive. The second one is another power plant in the Marble Cave area. They call it the Sussezon Valley. Over 1,000 acres of property down there, and 300 acres of it was bought by an off-island investor, and they plan to do a solar farm where that valley has pristine views of the ocean, an opportunity for more development. I think in the past there was a master plan for residential areas, a shopping center, a golf course, and things of that sort. And what are we doing? We're tying up that property for the next 25 years to generate electricity. So it had to be specially zoned by the Land Use Commission to be given a conditional use because that type of use is a massive use, and it's an industrial use. And the question comes in: is it the right use for that particular area? So that's kind of trying to drive home the point that we need the legislature's involvement in trying to ensure that we don't enact legislation if it goes contrary to the community. I know that the administration is committed to streamlining the development review process. From what I understand, there's a newly formed permitting streamline task force, and what I'm going to attempt to do is try to identify some of the processes that we as developers and contractors go through and the hoops that we need to jump through in order to get a permitting, a development off the ground here. If I can ask just briefly for you to raise your hand if you've had any experience at construction or development on the island. So, there's quite a few of you. And how many of you have attempted to build more than 6 houses in a subdivision? Okay, so there's a couple of you also. So I'm sure that you can feel for what I'm going to be talking about in trying to get through the process. So, why? Development and construction is one of the 3 pillars of our economy, and tax dollars are generated with more activity. I think Carl, you were able to state earlier, again, that we need capital from outside to be injected into the economy and to circulate in the economy in order for this economy to grow. And that's the point here, is that we need additional tax dollars generated through the development of more activity here on island. And so the government can then tax that money. The real estate industry, it depends on supply. And right now, the supply is not growing. So I think we were talking earlier, might have been Ron or Carlos, stating that we're just buying and selling the same units. And the prices keep going up. So we in the industry, we still see activity, but the cost of those units is increasing, and what we really need is an increase in the supply. The demand is outpacing the supply, driving up the prices for the same units. We see the military coming on island, and they have money for their housing allowance. Some of them are opting not to take that money and use it for rent. Some of them are opting to take that money and use it to pay a mortgage. So the military clients are actually buying up a lot of the housing stock on island. And what does that mean? There's less housing stock left for our local people. So our people are struggling to find affordable housing on Guam. And, in my experience at Gura, and Ron de Guzman, you can attest to this, we've always had a demand for affordable housing, and Carlos Camacho has assisted with trying to meet that demand for the very low and low clientele. Now he's working on that gap, right, by trying to get them some additional buying power. And so we continue to try to figure out how to get people in housing, but with the military now as a competitor, it makes it even more difficult for that. So We talked earlier about increasing labor costs, and you had Greg Massey here and others, and I run the risk, being the last speaker, of repeating a lot of the information that's already been said, but it truly is affecting our industry, and so it needs to be reiterated. Increasing taxes. Carl, you spoke about this, right? If I can just share with you an example recently, ancestral lands came back from the military to the local government. The local government gave it to the original landowners. Most of the original landowners are deceased. So the heirs of the original landowners now have an opportunity to get the property back. The government, though, wants to tax that property, capital gains, from the time, and the capital gains are calculated on the market value today. Well, capital gains is 20% of the value, from what I understand. So on a $5 million sale, 20% of that would mean that the sellers of that property would have to pay $1 million in taxes. In a recent transaction, the family sold all of the property to a family member. And the family member, or the family, loses out on 20% of the value of all that property. So and there's a court case that exists right now because the Department of Revenue and Taxation is trying to maximize that capital gains tax at 20%. And the industry is arguing that maybe it should not be a zero-base tax assessment, meaning the full market value, but it should be the difference between the value of the property when it came into the hands of the family and the market value today. That would reduce the taxable amount. So, increasing material costs. You've got rebar, you've got concrete, you've got all of these materials that go into building that are increasing also. You've got increased fees at the port, and so that adds to the material costs, shipping costs. Increase in infrastructure costs. I asked earlier about if any of you have developed a subdivision. Well, if you're trying to develop a subdivision in an R1 zone, which is for single-family residences, you end up having to put in full improvements. And those improvements would include curbs and gutters and sidewalks and streetlights and bus stops and recreation. And all of that adds to the cost of development. If I can share with you also, gosh, back in the early 1990s, I had an opportunity to market an all-concrete home. Granted, the land was the government's, but we were offering a 2-bedroom home for $65,000 and a 3-bedroom home for $69,000, constructed on your site. We can't do that today, of course. But a subsequent project that I was involved in, I took it through the Land Use Commission and for a 3-bedroom home. And by the way, this is Paradise Estates. We sold the original 3-bedroom homes for $179,000. And the 4-bedroom homes for $199,000. Anyone can tell me how much a 4-bedroom sells for today? $450,000. It's doubled. It's more than doubled. So you can see how the market has changed in 14 years, 15 years. So we as developers have always argued that this thing called the System Development Charge for Guam Water Works Authority is unreasonable and it adds to the cost of development. Somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000 for each home. For us, as developers, it's a pass-through cost to the buyer. You know that GWA has collected that money, and correct me if I'm wrong, has saved up over $18 million, has not spent a dime of that? I have an idea of how they can use that. Or just stop collecting the system development charge, but I've also had the opportunity to work on developing a master plan for the island back in the 1990s with Governor Abbott. And back then, we looked at trying to set up a capital improvement program for the government so that we can take the limited dollars that we have for water and sewer and channel those into areas that have very little environmental constraints, build up the infrastructure in those areas, and encourage developers to go and build in those areas. Because it just makes sense that it's easier to build upon and expand existing infrastructural systems instead of trying to create a new system in a remote area with all these environmental constraints. So, taking those capital improvement dollars, system development charge dollars, if you're going to collect them, focus them on a good capital improvement program. So. Well, I talked about the hybrid GLUC, and yeah, I kind of have an axe to grind with them on that one, but I just don't think that it's working. I wanted to talk a little bit about the burdensome permitting processes also. I said burdensome, and now I'm saying overburdensome. I looked at what the government publishes right now as a guide to developers, right? It's called the Guidebook to Development Requirements on Guam. It's 177 pages. And granted, maybe not all of that would apply to you. And it helps new developers, I think, try to get through the process, but 177 pages. I think it needs updating. The last revision is in 2005. And I'm not sure if this is directed to the legislature or the administration, but I think we should throw some dollars at updating that. We might even find some federal money for that, because I think initially it was funded by the Coastal Zone Management Program through the Bureau of Planning, or Bureau of Statistics and Planning. I left the link for the development guidebook on my slide presentation, so if any of you want to search for it or find it, the link is there. Some of the areas that you have to go through a review, we talked about the Guam Land Use Commission, the Application Review Committee, which is all the government agencies that kind of preliminary assess the development project prior to going before the GLUC through the hearings. Seashore clearance, wetlands permit, flood hazard permit, a tentative subdivision plan, and a final subdivision plan if you're doing subdivisions. Condominiums, resort hotel development down in Tumon, signs, building permits, grading permits, construction permits, sanitary permits, the Army Corps of Engineer permits, air installation zones, air pollution, hazardous waste management, pesticide regulations, solid waste, water, erosion control, aquifer, spill prevention, Department of Parks and Recreation, historic preservation, floodplain, and GPA, to name a few. The frustrating part, and I think somebody alluded to this also, is sometimes there's an absence of personnel to actually sign the documents. Somebody goes on vacation, somebody is sick, right? So it sits on their desks until that person comes back. or trying to get somebody for a construction project to come out and do the inspections. There's always delays, they're always backed up. Multiple signatures. You know, I went on an economic mission one time with Gita and the governor, and I went to Japan. I was over at Gura as a director. And after I did my presentation about affordable housing, I had a line of investors who wanted to get my business card and to talk to me. But one of them stated in the presentation that I heard it takes over 60 signatures in order to get approval for a development project in Guam. I think that's absurd. And we need to look at, again, trying to streamline that, and I hope that the administration works towards that end. When you have boards and commissions and committees, if you can't get quorum, you can't have a meeting, you can't get a decision. So you got to wait another week, another month, and I think we've experienced that more often than not. We talk about the permitting process, the GLUC application. All of those processes are lineal. But there's nothing wrong with changing that so that we can have different agencies of the government reviewing it simultaneously and signing off on things much more quickly. Because time is money for the developer, especially if you're taking out financing for the development project and there's a cost involved in that money. So you end up losing opportunity if you can't get the approvals quickly. So, next slide. Oh, is that it? Well, let me say this, Bobby, that I don't have all the answers, and we have an opportunity here because we have the senators in front of us. So if any of you have any experience that is a hindrance or a challenge, and you'd like to share it with your senators, now is the time, and I will welcome any and all questions. Thank you.
Any questions in the
Any
room?
questions?
Okay,
Jeff?
Welcome, Senators. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate you taking time to come down here and talk to us. All due respect to Carl, he mentioned the fact that sometimes the regulatory permitting process, the taxation, sometimes is too high. The fees that it costs people to go into business and the time that it takes to get through the permitting process. I know everybody here has been through that. I have too, trying to set up tenants. I actually had and some investors from Palau who were doing really well with their business. They wanted to open up a restaurant here on Guam because their restaurant in Palau was doing so well. They turned on their heels and they just could not believe the cost and the permitting process that they had to go through in order to open up in a business. And it's been about a year since they've been out here. There's another story behind what Carl was saying about the Z-boats and the Zwanich company that was out here that was part of the fishing industry. That business model, back then as I understand it, and I was here for the tail end of it because I was covering one of their cases in court in the CNMI, is that they were in the part of the industry that was using bait, the live bait that was necessary for the purse signing that they were doing out here in the CNMI and the Marianas Archipelago off the coast of Guam. They were having their fishing boats coming in and out of here, but they weren't longliners. These guys were dropping nets, and they were drifting out at sea, and they were catching as many fish as they possibly could. So the business model that worked back then, the baits that they were producing at San Nicolas Farms, was gangbusters. This was the 1980s, and the fish population was out here. The fish population since migrated to Papua New Guinea, and it kind of dried up. So my question in a roundabout way is, we have limited, finite resources, especially on islands where we're dealing with erosion constantly. Thank God we're on Guam. We're a bigger island, and we do have some erosion control out there, and that could probably also be better. But at a time where we're about to hit probably our biggest economic growth, as long as the labor gets here on time, and we're able to cross the border with all of the holdup in Washington, D.C. about getting the H-2B labor here that we need, what can we do to sustain our resources at a time when the buildup is coming? And also, if you can balance that out somehow with how the legislature is going to make the permitting process, the regulatory process, and the taxation process sustainable and attractive to outside investors. Thank you.
I don't know, that question is for Carl Gutierrez or anyone in the room, but first of all, Carl Peterson, and I say that because, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say first thank you to this GAR family. As your speaker of the 35th Guam Legislature, I want to say that each and every one of you in this room continues to want to better the quality of our life for our community. I want to say to each and every one of I want to say that our policymakers. Oh. That's okay. That's okay. Thank God. God didn't give me the talent to sing, but I want to say that our policymakers up here took the time to continue to hear the concerns that each and every one of you have. And ladies and gentlemen, as your public servant, I want to say that the legislature continues to create policy at the request, at the concerns that come up from each resident that wants to make their living conditions better. And for me personally, as your public servant and as your leader in the 35th Guam Legislature, I'm going to tell you that we want to continue to do that. When I was sitting here listening to the presentation and listening to all the questions and the ideas that were coming out, and literally just the presentations from like Uncle Carl Peterson, I want to share with you, I said, oh my God, this is such a blessing. We are here. I continue to go to the College of Hard Knocks because every day I learn something new. And the question was, how do we do it? How do we make permitting easier? How do we make checks and balances right for our community? I'm going to tell you, it's going to need a collaborative effort from all of us working together. When Mr. Camacho came up to me when I was in the 27th Guam Legislature, and he had been knocking on doors, he had come and said, what better way than to, on the 29th Guam Legislature, he said, what better way than to try and work with the leadership on hand? And Speaker Judy Wampat had invited us. And there was a list of concerns. And I said, how are we going to do this? And we said, we're going to take it one bill at a time. And we are going to go through this, and we are going to work with our realtor family, with our government agencies, with all the stakeholders on hand. And with that said, there was a resolution to bring the Affordable Housing Coordinating Council together. And because of that, ladies and gentlemen, all of you helped play a part on taking some of the government procurement bureaucracy and changing it to make it better for our residents. And when the question was asked, did any one of you have a problem going through that permitting process? I'm going to share with you right now, real life. I have a daughter-in-law who got her master's in May, got married last June, wants to open her own business, wants to open her own mom and pop store like her family, the Toti family in Anigua, to bring it down to Pago Bay. And to this very day, they continue to have problems. Not because the administration doesn't want to give them, it's because there were a lot of procedures that were put in place, not just by us policymakers, but federal guidelines. Legislation that was put into place to protect our people, to protect others from taking advantage of our people here, our environment here, our community here, our building here. So when that resolution came up to come together as a family, we did, and we were very successful. Maria can share that with you. Auntie Liz can share that with you. And those, Dave, Damian, and those who've taken the time to come to talk to us and saying, do we have a problem? My daughter-in-law and my son still don't have, because we need a conditional change. The floodplain is a violation. There's a house that has been built. The infrastructure has not been touched. But because of where they live and what they have to do, they have spent over $50,000 to renovate a family dwelling to try and open a mom and pop store. And believe me, I am taking the time, and the government has said they were going to help. That's not the only one. I was walking in to a funeral, and somebody said, I need your help, Senator, because it's not the government that's doing it, but there was some federal guidelines that we had to impose. And you need to help me make that change. But what about the infrastructure? Where now somebody rather buy a condominium or buy a house that's already built and refurbished, because in order to put your infrastructure in and your water, it's going to cost a resident $20,000 to $40,000 to lay the 6-inch lines that is supposed to be the government's responsibility. And then when the question was asked about, well, you know what? They're saving all that money at Guam Waterworks. A presentation was just done to us last week and saying we need to update, refurbish, and redo, and the money that we have is still not enough. So Senator, Speaker, we're going to come to you. And we are listening. But you know what I found out today, just sitting here in the last 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to need all of you, all of the government stakeholders, and any other regulatory agent in the federal. We did it with the bed and breakfast. We did it with the cannabis. We're doing it with the cannabis. We're working it with the film industry to bring new resources to the cruise industry. We have to bring everybody together. Because if we don't, we will be failing ourselves. And I was sitting here feeling good for a couple of minutes, feeling frustrated for a couple of minutes, feeling appreciated because some of you know what the work we have to go through just to make a difference. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd be fooling you if I didn't say this job wasn't easy. It's not easy. But we take the time to listen to all of you. A gentleman there spoke about the recapture and what we can do. It is about all of us. Who is working with the Hagana Restoration Redevelopment Authority, who we spent millions of dollars to get a plan in place. And I had a presentation of the plan, and believe me, I keep saying, are we dreaming? I want Guam to have these amenities, but can we afford it? Senator Tello finally took the time to work with us to do the introduction for the power rates for our condominium residents who are paying business rates when they should be paying residential rates. We continue to listen. I have Senator Clint Rigel, Senator Moylan, Senator Lee. We have they have been given the empowerment to do and work with you, and we continue to do that. But every time we come to a setting, we sometimes get told, thank you. But most of the times, we get told, you guys are not doing enough. I'm here to say we continue to listen. We continue to do good legislation that will help each and every one of you. We will continue to listen to the younger generation who wants to try and understand the process. And I think what we need to do as a community is to bring every stakeholder in, the government agency who does the implementation, us as the policymakers who create the policy that you as the community want. And I think that is the best thing we can do. That is the first step that we need to take. And Mr. Camacho talked about sharing his trade secrets. I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, that was probably a blessing because it continues to be shared. And if anybody can help master that, emulate it, and follow it through, great. But we can't keep tugging at each other. We got to be able to work together and move forward. Because you know what? Sometimes we cannot not look at what we need to do to protect the beautiful island that we live in. And all of you guys are just as important. If not, you do a lot to make a difference. But we need to do it together. I will continue to say that. And I would be humbled and honored that the government stakeholders who do the permitting process, who do the guidelines, who work with the protocols, they need to be at the same table to see how it can be made different. And the Lieutenant Governor of Guam did say to us at a presentation, said that he was going to work on making sure that the one-stop center, that the vision that the administration wanted it to be, to make it easier that all the government entities that need the residents to have to go through to get the permits, that it would be fully functioning. That is where the gap is. Do you guys agree with me?
Absolutely.
So how do we make it better? And I apologize for my passion here, but I've never turned my back. We have never turned our back. That's why you voted for us. So I ask you to please, I was going to ask, can we please, we were taking shots. I was asking Sharon, please take that. If we can't get the bullet notes, let's take a picture so we can take it back and do our research. And if legislation is needed, we are going to introduce it to make it better.
Absolutely. I wanted to say thank you. Okay. You want to go ahead and continue, Marcel? Okay, so I'm glad that that question came up, and we're going to be leading into the next portion of the dialogue with the 35th legislature. And moving forward, I wanted to first give Marcel Camacho a big hand of applause. Thank you. I want to give everybody the opportunity to speak, okay? And moving forward here, I want to first give a proper introduction to each one of you that are here in the room, okay? First, once again, thank you all for being here. I appreciate you, and I'm sure every one of us in this room of Guam Association of Realtors appreciates each and every one of you. We originally intended for a lot more senators to be here, but I thank you for being here today to listen and to work together. And we are here to listen, work together, and be one community. Great stewards of what we can make a change, and we have a great opportunity coming up. So first and foremost, we have the Honorable Tina Muñoz Barnes. We have the Honorable Senator Kelly Marsh Titano. We have the Honorable Senator Regine Bisco Lee. We have Honorable Senator Clinton Rigel. the Honorable Senator Telo Taitagui. And the Honorable Senator James C. Moylan. So I'm going to be opening this discussion up for a little bit more Q&A, but I know that a few senators want to have a few moments. Okay, well, we can continue with Jeff's question. How's that?
Thank you so much, Bobby, and thank you, Gar, for giving us this opportunity to really hear feedback from the community. It's really important to inform our decisions and to help us do the best job that we can. I also want to thank Senator Marcel for that presentation. And Jeff, if you're still here, hi, how are you? I just wanted to respond to your question, and I agree. I think that we have a need for some massive change with regard to promoting new construction and a number of industries. I think something that was brought up with Senator Marcel's presentation was the issues that we've been having in building permitting and the one-stop center. And earlier today, we actually had a confirmation hearing for the director of DPW, Vince Areola. And those were the top two questions that I asked him about. These are things that have been noted in the transition report for the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. And since he's taking the helm at that agency, I asked him directly what his plans are to improve that. I know that at the start of the term, there were only 3 building inspectors for the entire island of Guam, and that's certainly a hindrance to all of the work that you folks are doing. And so I asked him what his plans were. He said that he is hiring an additional person, either just hired or will hire very soon, and then our budget, the budget that they're sending down to the legislature will reflect additional personnel in that office. But he also did mentioned that it's an important part of his job to ensure the safety and that he's not just signing off on these building permits when they're not safe for the community. So I think balancing those things, and he understands that the business community and the community at large really needs these things to move in a much more rapid pace. I think he really does understand that, and so that's one of the reasons why I asked him that question. But I think I agree that there's a real need for permitting new construction, cutting through a lot of that red tape, making it easier to build. And that's one of the reasons why I'm taking a look at legislation that would encourage public-private partnerships and allow for qualified reviewers in the private sector to be able to augment existing permitting and existing inspection processes. So that's something that's coming down the pike, and I look forward to a lot of feedback from you folks in order to make that really happen. But just so you're aware, one of the things that we also just recently passed was Bill 1, and that's a tax cut to many small businesses, an expansion of the Dave Santos Act. And I'm really proud, I know the speaker had mentioned and Bobby had mentioned all of the senators that are here today. We're here because we want to listen to you. We are here because we are seeking your feedback. And I'm really proud that every single senator on this stage voted for Bill 1, and we want to be able to give that money back into the pockets of small businesses, back into the pockets of realtors and folks that are, making less than $250,000 a year, so that money can continue to circulate in the economy. So I certainly want to thank my colleagues for supporting those efforts, and we thank all of you for your feedback. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. So I'm going to walk around the room if we have any additional questions or concerns. It's a dialogue. It's a dialogue between us and the senators that we have here. So I wanted to thank you guys again. I also wanted to make an announcement that we also have Guam Housing Corporation here in the house today. Miss Mary Guerrero, if you could please stand and be recognized. Thank you, Mary. Okay, so the dialogue can go between our senators, the experts in the House, and it can go back and forth too. So I see Miss Senator Marsh.
Half a day. So I just wanted to add a little bit to that as well. I know that there are senators that are looking to refine and streamline the procurement process within the government. And as you mentioned, several people had mentioned that the administration has a task force that's looking at the permitting process. And some of what they're looking at, it goes along the lines of what Senator Biscoe-Lee was mentioning, but they're looking at the ability to self-certify. The expertise is here, and so these are processes that have been successful in the mainland, and we're looking at some of those successes in the mainland for streamlining processes. There are also streamlined processes that can be incorporated into the historic preservation processes and the clearing that they do. So we are looking at both the legislature and the administration. We're looking at some of those models that have been successful, and we hope that those will be being rolled out and making it a true difference that you can see and feel.
I believe we have a question here. Okay, comment.
Senators, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Patricia Fury. Senator Munia Barnes, I appreciate that every time we have a GAR event, you show up. We appreciate that you are so supportive of our efforts. And it bothered me just now, listening to you speak, that you appeared so hurt. This is not a bashing. This here is a dialogue, okay? And it's wonderful to hear from you all what you are doing, because some of the things you do are behind the scenes. We don't know of it. So that is why this dialogue is important. You tell us what you are doing behind the scenes, okay? Please do not misunderstand this to be a bashing.
And that's why I want to say thank you, and that's why I said please forgive me for my passion. It's because we work really hard and we listen to you, and sometimes the frustration we feel as policymakers, the same frustration you guys do, and that's why I believe in my heart that we need a concerted effort to bring all the stakeholders onto the same forum so that we can understand and share in the issues and concerns that come to the forefront. And as we look at opportunity to bring new resources, to introduce new industries, to bring back industries that were very successful in the past, like Jeff was talking about, our governor had talked about the aquaculture and the realization of that and it coming back. And even if it was met with some skepticism, it's how do we believe we can move forward in making this successful for Guam again? And I always say what may have been not good back then may be great today. What may have been good back then may not happen today. So again, I want to say that I always get passionate when I'm here. It's a love that I believe that each and every one of you hold near and dear to your heart also, because every time I come to a GAR forum, it is always packed, and always the questions of interest have never really changed. And how do we as policymakers make it better for all of us in the community? And how do we bring the new industries in? And how do we get over the hurdles of what still exists in law today that we may not be able to change? Or how can we get around that, but to ensure that also that the protection of our environment and our community are held to the high, utmost standard. So again, please know that it is within my desire to help make a difference with you that I continue to speak passionately about wanting to really make this beautiful island that we have, that we've been blessed to live in, be the best around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Please introduce yourself first and then ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jean Mann from Absolute Realty. I want to ask Mary Guerrero, when can we possibly have funds, or is there any available funds for first-time home buyers and kahat?
Not for this room.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for extending this invitation. I'm sorry I was late. I was told show up at 3. Okay, I should have known better. But anyway, to answer your question regarding the kahat, we do have funds. That is a program that as payments are received, the principal payment, and it's an interest-free loan, so it becomes available. It's a revolving loan fund. We did not, at the inception of the program, we did not receive the total funding that was appropriated. And so, but we make do with what, and at one time, that program was very popular. And then, we had more funds, people weren't. I would go out there, tell them about the program. It's a program that would be used to complement a loan that you may get from a bank. So typically your bank is 80%, and then the additional 15% would be made available so that you would have 2 mortgages to purchase your property or to build, and then but you're still required to put the applicant's still required to put 5%. So at one time when there were loan programs that were 100% financing, that program wasn't as popular then. Now it is. It's coming back where they're interested in the interest-free program. It's 30 years. It runs the same term as your first mortgage, interest-free. So the maximum loan amount you can get is $40,000. So that $111 a month for 30 years. It's a good program. We have the first-time homeowner. Unfortunately, that is it's more a cost-driven program. It's not an income-driven, so you actually have your working families being eligible for such a program, as long as you do not exceed the total cost of $300,000, and that was just recently done. From time to time, we would look at how the market is, what is considered an amount that people can actually purchase. So it was just last year when the law was amended to allow for $300,000. But the max for the grant is $10,000. It's still $10,000, but it helps. We recently received $300,000. That came and gone. And it was, we were able to assist 33 families. We are expecting another $300,000. And so, but we're encouraging applicants to please submit your applications. As long as you submit your applications and it's been determined that it's complete, you're eligible, you can go ahead and close your loan. And at that time, we would get a certification from the bank that they're still eligible to receive the grant. And that money would be would be given to the applicant. Yes. And the reason for that is the bank uses different loan programs. So some programs don't even allow grants. They still allow funds from the applicants. So, but please encourage your clients to just submit the applications, get it complete, and we put them in the order that they are complete, not necessarily received, because if it's not complete. And then as eligibility certificates, if they expire, if they don't get an extension, we're making those funds available. So it is a very popular program, and a lot of people are very interested in such a program. And like I said, it's a program that's not income-driven, it's a cost. So now you have your working families being eligible for a grant. Some of the financial institutions are concerned that there's not a mortgage attached to this grant. However, they're required to stay 5 years in the property that they're acquiring, and if they don't, there would be a formula for them to pay back part of the grant. And we would tell them at that. And they're required to sign that they understand that they have to live in the house 5 years. So if they're building when the house is, they issue the occupancy 5 years from there. It's really not a difficult program to, you know, meet the requirements. We encourage that they continue to apply even if they're ready to close. Some applicants have been able to borrow from family members, but are really counting on the grant so that they can pay back family members. And if that's permissible by the banks, it's okay with us, because we will get that. We will need to get a letter from the bank saying they can get the money. Believe me, some banks says no. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Guerrero from Guam Housing Corporation. Senator, you have a question for Mary, or?
Actually, yes, I do. And I have a question for her. First, I'd like to thank the GAR for the invitation to be here today, and I greatly appreciate it and hearing everyone's comments. As you know, I've introduced legislation based on comments or a request by individuals in the GAR. As you know, the GPA loan was one, GPA power rates was one of them, and hopefully we'll know something by Wednesday. Fred Harecki is there, and I hope you have a good response or an answer to that next week, Wednesday. And what makes it even better is that the board, your board, the GAR's board, has been there to support that legislation. Sometimes it was mentioned that when we get someone who comes up to us and asks us to introduce legislation, and then they go away, and they expect us to do all the work, you know, but we need you there. We need you. We need a petition. We need to hear from the public. We need to show the other senators that it's not just coming from one person, it's coming from many. And I want to commend the GAR board for being there on that bill for GPA. So can I give it up for your board?
Thank you, Senator Tolotai.
Also, and then also I've introduced other legislations we talked about earlier about regulatory agencies, and a bill that was just recently passed. And unfortunately, it's probably not very popular with the administration, but with some people who are going out to try to get approval for zone variances, for getting approved for something. So my bill basically fines the director $1,000 out of their personal funds if they do not follow through with the time frame that is implemented in law. So we'll see how that goes if the governor signs that bill, okay? And if you want it to go through, then you need to send an email to the governor. You need to send some information. Please be a part of the solution too. Send your emails out. But my question too is to Mary, and I don't know everything. There's so much to learn being a senator, and where the funding is coming from is one of the concerns I have. Earlier when they asked about the $300,000 for the loan, and you mentioned that it's already wiped out. So my question to you is, where did that $300,000 come from? Did it come from a grant? That means federal funding. And what type of funding from the government of Guam, the general fund, is given to Guam Housing Corp to implement any type of these first home loans? So if you can answer my question with regard to how much money can you get from the general fund versus how much from the federal side. Thank you.
All right, the funding source is this GDIT funds. And so I believe that when it is turned over to the government of Guam, there is a period that they would have to hold on to it before they can make it available, because people can still have that opportunity to claim that. And so when we saw that the demand was greater than the funds we were receiving, we did look at alternatives, how we can address to have a funding source that would always be available, because we do know that it is attached to a timeline that the loan has to close. That's when the trust fund program was authorized. It's a program that's available. We need to identify funding sources so that any program attached or would qualify under the trust fund program, that's the housing trust fund program, they would get funded. The legislature, the senators would determine which program would be eligible, would fall under the purview of the housing trust fund, as well as how much, a percentage of what funding would be made available to each program. Programs such as really low lending capital for loans for low income, maybe even to lend out so that people can borrow for interest-free for infrastructure, for water, whatever, homeless program. So one of them is there's only two programs. One is the grant, the first-time homeowner, but that one strictly indicates that it's coming from this cheated funds. We don't have any money right now under the housing trust fund. That is what Guam Housing has been working on to determine how can we get a funding source that can be made available for the programs that this community needs in respect to housing. And, unfortunately, we still haven't. There was a bill passed. It passed by the legislature, but vetoed by the governor. So we're not quitters here. We're going to put it back. We're working on that. It's something that that they feel the programs attached to the Housing Trust Fund it's a needed program. It's a program for your working families. So, and like I said, there's other things that may be created, but it would still have to, we can introduce it, but it would still have to be approved by the senators and then determine where the funding source would be. But if it had a funding source that can be, they can take from that funding source, then funding won't be an issue, including for the housing, the grant.
Ladies and gentlemen, just based on that comment, I just want to share that the vice speaker last term, I had the opportunity to try and turn legislation in, but it was some folks in this community who literally lobbied hard to not get it passed. And that's what I meant about sometimes what may have been good back then is not good today. What may have been bad back then is much better today. So sometimes timing is everything. Yes, at that time we introduced the first-time homeowners program with at the impetus of Speaker Ben Pangilinan and Speaker Wampat and myself and others in the legislature who followed that program through. We did find a funding source, and at that time it was the cheated funds. We did also try to implement a new program looking for the resources and leveraging what we had with trying to get a couple of grants out there. That can still be in the works. There's another program that we also want to look at that will be very advantageous to teachers and firemen and police officers out there. And, we don't have to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel. We just need to emulate what the successes are even in our nation. So the Good Neighbor program, has any one of you ever heard of that? And that gives an opportunity for houses to be built of 50% off of I guess housing costs and what it's going to take to move forward in building that. There's no income requirement. You just have to apply. So how do you get programs like that to come back into our community? And we continue to look at that. Our staff works tirelessly to try and look at those things, and I think what we need to look together with the community and literally even working for support from like GAR is when we go out for grants, to bring these new resources in is getting the support from all of you too and saying this is why we need it. And that's why I'm saying that, as some of you talked about the credit programs that were out there, then we talked about the low-income tax credits. Now we can even look at this new good neighbor concept, and you're going to be hearing more about that. A couple of our colleagues here has asked to really research that, and it's very successful in the mainland, and I really believe it can be successful here because it doesn't have that, we don't have to look at the income of the buyers or of the residents here to have to get the funding for new houses. Again, not for those who want to renovate or refurbish, but for first-time new homeowners. That this would be that program. And then again, will be open to teachers, firemen, police officers. Am I missing anybody else on that program?
Realtors.
No. Yeah, so it was part of a community-based advocation from those in the community, in the United States. So.
Thank you, Speaker. Really appreciate it. No, you keep that mic up there, please. Thank you. I wanted to recognize the Honorable Senator Sabina Perez for being here also. Thank you for joining us. So we have additional comments. Please introduce yourself and then.
I'm Sandy Yao with Today's Realty. Thank you, Senators, for this afternoon. I don't know if it's so much as a question. It might even be informing you of something that you may not be aware of. I recently went to both the Department of Land Management and to EPA in an effort to start the process of obtaining a building permit for some buyers who had bought some property, have not closed on the property, but they wanted to make sure that they could build. And the reason why they wanted to check in advance is because the property is located in Jigo, and as you may or may not know, in Jigo, you cannot own or you cannot build on a quarter-acre lot anymore, correct? Right? Everybody knows that, right? You cannot build on a quarter-acre lot. It has to be a half-acre or more because it's over the water lens. And there's no sewer. Well, in some places, but nonetheless, you're not to construct on a quarter-acre lot. There are many quarter-acre lots in Jigo still that exist from parental subdivisions or from having been subdivided to quarter-acre lots before that law was implemented. So when I went to EPA, a wonderful man dressed in fatigues named Brian Bearden told me that there is now before the AG's office a request to have that clarified. He admitted that he's a man who likes to cross his T's and dot his I's, and he's very exacting. And he wants to be sure that this can continue, that Guam can continue to build on quarter-acre lots over the water lens. The problem I have with that is that it would deem the property of many of these people as fallow, as invalid. They can't do anything with it. And we can't have people on Guam, landowners, that have land that they can do nothing with. And that's what this legislation or this law does. These people cannot do anything with this property. So he may be right in that that is what the law dictates. If I go to land management, Frank Titano says that is not correct, that we should be able to still give these people building permits if they have already quarter-acre lots. And many of these may have come about by a parental subdivision. So I don't know if you are aware of it. It is with the Attorney General's office. It has been there for maybe 10 days. But it is something I think that needs to be brought to your attention because I think at some point it may come to your desk. Thank you.
Senator?
Thanks. I just want the opportunity to stand up because my watch tells me I need to stand. I'm a new senator, first time running, first time in, 35th Guam legislature, happy to be here. Your situation, which you were mentioning, what we've been doing in our office is amending several laws. You probably have a really good point. I'd love to help you with that. You point out the exact law and how the wording should be different. It's a matter of amending the law. If I can get that passed among my legislatures, we can probably help that out. So it will reduce the confusion of how to interpret the law. Speaking of interpreting laws and making some changes, Mr. Peterson talked about taxation, right? One of the things I've introduced when I first came on board was Bill number 9. Bill number 9 is to reverse back the business privilege tax. You got a 5%. Thank you. You got a 5%. I said bring it back to 4%. Of course, I hit some tough roads on that, and it hasn't got into a public hearing, but I introduced it. It brought up the conversation. What can we do to reduce taxes? How do we promote business? That's one. Another bill I introduced was bill number, I've done so many. Bill number 10. That's reversing the liquid fuel tax. So that liquid fuel tax was introduced by a Republican senator, and there was good intentions for that, and that was to help the roads and other things too. Sometimes these special funds get raided. It doesn't always go to where it's supposed to go, and that's because of different situations. And we thought what is best at that time may have worked, but now I think we should relook at that and reverse the liquid fuel tax as well. Again, reducing the price of the cost of goods, reducing the price of BBT by 1%, 1 point, I believe. It raised, that increase raised $60 million. So where is that money going? How is that being used? We definitely needed it from the Trump tax cuts. That's what our government told us. But are we still using it correctly? I think we should have different cuts, and that's why I introduced the bill to reduce the BBT, and that's why I introduced the bill to reduce the liquid fuel tax. Everything costs. Everything adds up. Everything costs that Mr. Peterson was talking about. It goes back to your business and try to start up a business. Some other bills introduced One Stop. So our administration did an executive order to correct the One Stop. Our governor recognizes the importance of getting things streamlined. Well, so does your legislature as well. There's actually a bill that is there, or rather a law for establishing the One Stop Center. But again, it needs some tweaking. So I amended it, and we're hoping to get that on the floor too. But there's some delays because we're putting it more towards Department of Revenue and Taxation and not necessarily Department of Public Works, because we think the ones that issue the license can also take away the license. So we want to put it back to them. So that's something we've introduced. That's another bill we've also introduced to a one-stop center, an actual working one-stop center. Another bill we introduced also is weights and measurements. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the weights and measurements. Some call it the test law. What that is doing, and some of you may know, the cost of goods are also increased by the landing fees and transportation of those products across our roads. There's a good intention of why that bill was introduced or became law, but I think it could use some tweaking to help reduce our costs too. So that was coming to the floor. Everything that goes on the ship and it lands on the island is transported by a truck across the marine drive, and that cost is affected by what's called the weights and measurements law, or the test law. So I've introduced a measure as well to reduce that cost too, to help reduce the cost of your goods. So I'm looking at it as an economic standpoint, and I'm looking at it to try to help the small business. I'm looking at it because it affects how much it costs to build the home. Mr. Camacho over here, right? This cost of materials is all affected by that. The BBT cost it's all affected by your cost of your nails as well, your hammers, your goods. It's just not the cost of employee's salary, but it's the cost of your materials. I got a few notes here. There's something if you're not aware of yet, but if you received some of your customers probably got the $1 million and more property. Anybody have received their second tax bill on that?
There's a few in the room, I'm sure.
Just a few? So that law did
more
pass.
than a few.
That law did pass, and there was good intentions for passing that law. But I've asked the Attorney General for an opinion on that. I don't think it should go back to previous years on 2018. I think it should be moving forward. And we're waiting on an answer for that. So we challenged it. It's law, it's passed, but when should it be effective? Some customers have already paid their taxes on their $1 million buildings, right, plus more, and then recently got another tax bill that was due last month, right? And it basically doubled you. It doubled your total taxes. So what happens if you already had a loan on that property? Do you go back to your bank and say, can you pay my taxes again? How is that going to address your mortgage on that loan of your property? Or if you sold the property last year, do you go back to the person you bought it from, or is the new owner responsible for that? So those things are questionable, and that's why we're asking the Attorney General for his help. So stay tuned. We should get just spoke with him the other day. Stay tuned, and we should get a word out from him shortly. But I understand some of you are very disappointed in that and looking at legal aspects to see what you can do too. So just know that we're trying to work on that as well. Other things that affect the prices of our goods and our island's economy is how well our tourism comes to Guam, right? Our whole economy, this is a generating business. We're in this beautiful hotel as well, but it's only here for the purpose of the tourists. I've introduced several bills, 97, 98, and 99, that increases penalties on things that we've been seeing lately. I think the crime rate is just, I don't like reading the paper and it seems like a police spotter. I want to read the paper about something exciting, about property or about people's success and stories like that, but it shouldn't be a police spotter. And it's about, if it's about criminal sexual conduct, if it's about rapes on children, that's just totally disgusting. So I introduced a few bills that addresses that as well. And there's also one recent bill I introduced, I think it's Bill 100, Crimes Against Tourists. I think that hurts our economy tremendously. If you commit a crime against a tourist, some of you may recall when there was the accident or the pedestrian that were injured down in front of Outrigger at that intersection where the car driver just rolled his car right into the crowd and then came out with a knife and started stabbing them. What did GVB have to do after that to ensure the safety of the tourists to come to the island? So all that did have an economic impact, and I think those that commit crimes against tourists should be punished even greater, or if not so greater, but it should be looked at in a different way, because that increases the impact on tourism, which increases the impact on our taxes, which increases the employees, which increases the home being able to pay for your mortgage if you lost your job because you're no longer in business. Just a few of those things that I've introduced. I've also introduced a bill or resolution to discuss about, I'm short?
Yeah, well, yes.
Okay, I should have had slides, right? Oh, my watch says it's time to sit down. Okay, so what I would recommend that you all do, all of your senators here are very busy and doing a lot of good things for the island. Please go to the 35th Guam Legislature Organization website. It tells you all the bills that we've introduced and where we're at. I think we have a great team here. This group of people really listen well, and we're glad to be here and support you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. You know, I want to give an opportunity for our other senators as well, Carlos. But before we have that, Carlos, you have a question or comment? Let's keep it short, please.
No, since you got all the senators here and you got one of the agencies here, Guam Housing, you know, a lot of people don't know the success of this is cheated funds. Liz was there and some of the realtors, you guys remember many years ago we sat down, you were there, we sat down and Marcel, you were head of the Affordable Housing Coordinating Council at that time. We sat down and looked at where we're going to get these funds so we can get these homeowners to closing. And one of the things we did at that time was worked with Tina Barnes and Speaker Wampat, and where this cheated was found. And that was basically, if you remember, every quarter the bank announces all the dormant accounts. So one day we saw that and we said, hey, where's all those money going? That's where it's coming from. But a lot of people don't know what that yielded year to date, just to get everybody to know the stats, $96 million of real estate activity. $96 million. Sorry, I stole that thunder from you. But the reason I say that is we're here to provide. I remember at that time when we brought it up with the senator and the speaker, some of the senators was concerned, and they had the right to be concerned when we were going to take those as cheated funds and put it to a program that would yield a multiplier. Earlier I mentioned about an economic multiplier. That $96 million was only $3 million of his cheated funds that yielded $96 million of real estate activity. What a huge multiplier. That's the difference. And the reason I say that is Senator Tello mentioned what other source? They tried it, the trust fund source. Senator Talina Nelson did what she could. She got it passed by this August body, but it was vetoed by the governor for whatever reason. Everybody has their reasons, right? But now today we're going to try to provide solutions to yield more closings. So two things I want to mention. Senator Tello said, where's the federal funds? Just as of 2 weeks ago, they just announced the Federal Home Loan Bank, which all our banks are members of, right? From Region 9, they have access of $500 million of grants. And two bodies only can apply for that. A nonprofit body, which is me or anybody else. But I'm letting you know now, a public body can apply for that. Yeah, you. But you have to go with a partner bank, and luckily the governor is a banker. I don't know if that's a conflict. But it's open to First Hawaiian, Bank of Hawaii, ANZ Bank, Bank of Guam. So all those banks are members of this Region 9, and $500 million just a week ago announced that a public body can announce for those grants for down payment program. So those are additional funds. Secondly, how do we find a revolving fund? Cheated funds is only happen whenever we have a yearly thing, but you gotta wait the 2-year milestone before they don't claim it. You know, when we come up and we're not trying to take any money from your existing cash flow. For every home that's being built, there is a BPT being paid. But that BPT is not being paid until the home is being built or sold, right? So what if we self-circulate that BPT for that particular purchase? It may not be the $10,000, but if that guy is going to build a $200,000 house, but he's short 10 grand, let him self-certify that with his BPT, because without that BPT, you won't have that closing, and you won't ignite those other economic triggers. So for you, the senators, can figure out a written policy that they'll self-certify that contractor with his internal BPT with its own client, Mr. and Mrs. John Doe, then that way, that waiting list you got, Mary, that individual that applies for that can self-certify their own down payment and closing costs. It'll make the deal close, and the deal will happen, and it'll be part of the 96 million plus. That's just my idea for you guys to look at some of the policies. Thank you.
Okay. I will have one last comment or question before we go to the senators. Okay?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Aurora Khan from BHI Realty. I'd like to thank the senators for taking time from their busy schedule to dialogue with us. I have actually 3 questions. The first one is with regards to the mortgage credit, mortgage certificate credit program. Since Mary is here from GHC, can I please find out from her if there are any existing rules and regulations that they have to implement this program? And then the second question that I had was regarding, something that Marcel mentioned about money not being used from the water development program. I think that's criminal. Considering that the government is always lacking funding, why isn't money being used that's available if it's not being used? So I'm asking for clarification regarding that. And my third question is regarding the homelessness problem. What are the measures being taken by the government to address the homelessness problem?
Before the senators answer that, we only have short minutes here, please. So, first senator to address the question. Question number 1 or 2 or 3? Mary. There's Mary, okay. There you are. We have to keep it short, Mary, if you don't mind.
It's on our website.
No rules yet, but there is a draft, and that we're going to go ahead and I do know the president wanted this body to know that will be worked on as soon as possible. We're hoping to get that dialogue with Carlos since he's done all the research. It has to happen, and we have to have the partnership with revenue and tax as well. Thank you.
On question number 2, the system development charge that they've been collecting, from what I understand, they are trying to prioritize the areas where they're going to extend the infrastructure to, and I think it's more specifically water lines. But again, a true capital improvement program for water, power, sewer is what we need for this government to try to steer development into particular areas that are less environmentally sensitive. I know that this legislative body is very sensitive to the environment and provide opportunity for development in areas that don't have constraints. Thank you.
I just want to say I wish GWA was here because they did share a presentation
So do
with
I.
us, and I want you to know that based on the funding that was there, that funding is supposed to be used as a leverage to acquire more federal funds and also know that the improvements based on the Clean Water Act and all the federal guidelines that are out there, that there is a need for additional funding, and that was one of the concerns or the issues that they wanted to bring to us as an August body to borrow more money. So again, we are very, very conservative. We want to make sure that literally all the questions, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, but that money is not held for personal or for the use of just GWA. Part of that's leveraging, part of that is acquiring more federal grants based on the existing money they already have, and then also taking care of the concerns that are needed to be upgraded based on the Clean Water Act and the other federal guidelines that are out there. And then the third question was about homelessness. We've been working closely at least some of our colleagues have been working closely with like the Homeless Coalition and making sure that we work with even some of our island brothers and sisters. I've been working closely with the Palawan senator in reference to several of the homeless families that are of the Palawan community and that they want to address. A lot of it has to do with not just them wanting to be out there, but there could be some medical issues. We talked with the administration about doing interagency work and support to truly finding why these homeless folks are out on the streets, and how do we direct them to the services that they need. So that's another concern that we've been working with. And we did notice that there were some new folks that are living on the streets that are new to Guam. So again, those are being addressed with the Department of Public Health and Social Services, working with our housing folks. We do have some homeless shelters with Guam Housing, of course with GURA, but again, that interagency component is coming together. So, and the nonprofit organization with the Guam Homeless Coalition and all the others like Salvation Army, Catholic Social Services, and all the other nonprofit organization stakeholders that are coming together to truly find a solution. And we still need to work. We all have a special project that we work in helping to clean our island, to help stop erosion by planting trees. Just being able to go out there with our staff on weekends and on holidays to help clean and protect what we've been blessed with. So that's the answer to the third one. So interagency support is going to, with the administration, is very key.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to give an opportunity to the senators that haven't spoke yet, to if you can make it brief.
That would be me.
Yes, sir. That would be you, Senator Clinton Rigel. And also Kelly Barge-Taitano and Senator Sabina. Okay.
All right, so I don't have a watch to tell me, but I'll just stand up anyway. So a few of the things I've been working on actually are some of the same things that Senator Telo-Taitagui was working on. I supported her and worked closely with her on the measure that eventually turned into an application with the PUC to get residential rates for customers living in condominiums. And so I worked closely with Telo on that measure and with the application process and getting it started down at the PUC. Another thing I've done is I've supported bills that I felt were good for the economy and good for the island and good for some of the things you guys are concerned about, particularly recently the measure that was passed, also Senator Taidegui's measure, which was the one you spoke about earlier that fines directors who don't turn in their stuff on time, basically, for regulatory issues. So that's an attempt to help speed up the regulatory process. And so that's something that I supported and we managed to get passed. Also, I supported Senator Regine Bisco-Lee's tax break for small businesses, bill number 1. So those are some of the bills that I've supported. And overall, I hear what you guys are saying, a lot of the discussion that happened earlier about the need to sort of balance taxes versus onerous regulations. And so I echo the same thing that our speaker said earlier, that we want to work together with you guys. We don't have all the answers. We don't know exactly what all the issues are with regards to the regulatory processes and how they can be streamlined and improved. So please come to us if you have an idea of a specific regulatory process that is unnecessary and could be eliminated or streamlined in some form or fashion. Let us know and we'll work with you guys to figure out how we can do that. In addition to that, I think some of the problem that I've heard other people have encountered, my wife herself encountered it. So my wife is from the village of Mauricio, and every year we usually do this crab festival, and we have a booth. My wife's family, my mother-in-law is really known for making stuffed crabs. So we enter this once a year, one weekend thing, and just the process to get all the paperwork, just to have a one weekend event, made us not do it this year. So I understand that. My wife got the runaround. She went everywhere. She went to one agency who said, and this is one of the problems I think, is that not everyone understands what the actual procedure is, what the SOPs are. So she'll go to one agency and they'll say, oh, no, you have to get the stamp from that guy first. She goes to that guy and he goes, no, you're supposed to get a stamp from them first. She goes to that guy, and then it's a third person. No one knew what the process was, so she was being ping-ponged around. And this year we were like, let's not even do it. It's not worth it for one weekend. And no one else, basically my wife didn't want to do it anymore. She's like, I'm not going to run around to all the agencies and try to figure this out. And no one else in her family wanted to do it either. So I think there's got to be some sort of effort to improve that level. And I don't know if that's going to require legislation or just some sort of massive training effort where we get everyone on the same page where they know what the procedure is. Because it seems to be like whoever's at the front desk, it depends what they know. So if one person's at the desk, they say, oh, I know this is the procedure. You go back and it's a different person at the front desk and they're like, no, this is the procedure. So we need to get everyone on the same page first as to what the actual procedures are. Then we can see if there's legislation that needs to change any of the procedures in this entire process. So I think that's one of the issues that we need to address. And again, I'm open to anything, any suggestions from you guys, and we'd like to keep the dialogue open, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Sabina Perez.
Hello. So thank you so much. I apologize for being late, but I do appreciate this event. I do want to establish a dialogue with the realtors in regards to how to address the problems that you're seeing in your day-to-day operations. As a chair for the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement, I think I stand in a good position to help partner and help shape policies that are going to be sustainable for our island. And some of the things I've been mentioning is that I really want to encourage mixed developments in urban areas, because as you know, we see our island, we have limited green space, and I think we can create more communities that protect our environment and at the same time make us money. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential out there, and you know, I'm willing to work with anybody who wants to take this journey to develop these beautiful developments that can create sustainable communities. There's something that's called eco-villages. Wouldn't it be great to be able to live and work in the same environment or same village where you use less resources, but you can make your living at the same time? And there are examples out there. I went to Hawaii. There's this school called Connections, and they have, they teach people with disabilities on how to produce products. and if we can combine that with a living space. So in regard to homelessness, I mean, I think, it depends on how creative we are in coming to these solutions, but also staying rooted in the policies and hopefully changing some of those policies. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to help develop something that works for all of us in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Sabina Perez. Okay. We're good? All right. I have some announcements that, well, first of all, thank you, Senators. I want to thank you all for being here. I also wanted to ask you to hang out. We have a mixer after this. So please, we're going to be able to talk about mixed-use development, GRT, and so on, please, and even the homeless issue. So announcements, Peggy? Do we have any announcements? Okay, we're moving forward. Okay. Well, it's been a great afternoon and a lot of valuable information. Again, thank you to our 2019 Legislative Committee for organizing this event. You've all earned your credits this evening, so please, thank you very much. Now it's time to relax and have some fun. Our mixer is located in the Cafe Chino private room by the lobby area. So please, if all you senators, all you individuals out there, senators, realtors, brokers, and members, please join us. Thank you very much for coming out here, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you.